2, 3. Проба.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening and good day, actually. Welcome to the CCCSEE 2020 Co-working and Co-living Conference Southeast Europe digital event. We are happy to have people from all over the world joining in today. And it's safe to say that we have a lineup to match. The beauty of an online event is that you can actually say good night or good morning. We have some of you that are sipping early morning coffee. Probably some of you are making a midday snack. And for those of you who are very lucky and in a different time zone, you're probably having a really nice glass of wine, joining in from an evening somewhere in Asia. We're profoundly thankful for the love and support that we have received from all of you guys in the past 2 months. The love has been pouring over through social media, through messages, through emails, comments, hashtags, personal calls, Zoom calls, and you have really made the effort of putting this event together that much more meaningful for us. In addition to our community, we are blessed to have an amazing roster of people, professionals in their field, who went above and beyond, and if I may add, sometimes even outside the set boundaries of ideas, to make the gathering a synergy of experiences, insights, and actually added value for all of you guys who are tuning in today. A big thank you goes to our supporters. Without them, a lot of this would not have been possible. European Freelancers Week, that we are a proud digital part of, Co-working Assembly that has made the connections possible, and our friends at Symphony who are hosting us here in their beautiful space. All of you are one of the key reasons why we were able to pull all of this together. Obviously, big thanks goes to our technical staff that you don't see behind the lines, people who made all of this stream possible. And the fact that we have an event today is a testament to the community, actually, that we managed to build around the framework of the last year's kickoff conference. Last but not least, I have a personal message for Misha, the guy that you all know, for being the driving force, despite not having a license to drive a car, behind the CCCSEE, and feeling that even this year, when so many things have actually collapsed, when so many deals did not go through, when so many things happened in a way that none of us could have anticipated, when the world changed, his passion hasn't. And I am personally thankful, and on behalf of everyone here, and I'm 100% sure everyone watching and tuning in today, we're all thankful for his energy and inspiration to keep the tradition afloat. And actually, if I may say so, provide a bridge of a gap that is 2020 into 2021. So, a few housekeeping issues before we officially start with the program. First of all, we have received several different people asking questions about what can we expect in terms of the Q&As today with the live Zoom-ins and with the panelists that we're going to have in the studio and the people tuning in through the Zoom to join the event. The best way to leave your comments, to pose any of the questions to any of the speakers that we're going to have today is to do that through YouTube comments. You just log in with your Google account. It's super easy. Ask a question. All of us will be keeping track of the questions, and if I miss something, Misha or somebody from the crew is going to step in, let me know what the question is, and then we can deal with that with the panelists or the keynote speakers. The other way to do it, and I'm going to personally keep track of this, you can tweet us. Our Twitter account is at CCC _SEE, and if you're not following us, this is the time to do it. And then tweet us a question while the panel is rolling, or even after. We'll try to be as responsive as possible to all the feedback and all the comments and all the questions that you guys may have for us while we're sitting here today. Probably, if all of that fails, send us a message on Facebook, and then we'll be checking those as well. Once again, thank you for everyone for making CCCSEE 2020 as a digital event possible. Thank you to all of our supporters, all of our friends, all the technical staff once again, all the beautiful people here in Symphony who are hosting us today, have been making us coffee since this morning, and actually provided a beautiful sunshine that you see, or you don't see, but you see the beautiful weather in the background. This is probably one of those moments where I should stop talking, but I'm actually very excited to make the first announcement of the conversation that we're going to have with someone who is a dear friend of CCCSEE and someone who I can say has been a believer from day one. In the first panel today, or a first talk of the day, we're very lucky to have in person one of our friends who is a cultural anthropologist. Her name is Tamara Nikolić, and she has traveled all the way from Croatia, from Rovinj, to join us here today. The story of Tamara is the one that I'm going to leave to her to tell you. But the story of Tamara and CCCSEE is something that I would like to share with all of you today. As you know, last year at the event we have announced, and we were very excited about that the conference will take place in Rovinj. And that was the deal we had at the beginning of the year. We were supposed to spend 3 beautiful days there, enjoy everything that Rovinj has to offer in terms of history and culture and food, and to connect with people directly. And then obviously COVID-19 happened. And then a lot of things, that's when I was referring to things falling apart, that is when the system actually broke down. And we were not sure whether or not we're going to do the event at all. However, Tamara has been there as the supporter from day one and was our partner on the project. And we are more than happy to have her today to kick off and to kickstart this session for us. The beauty of the conversation that we're going to have is that we're actually going to go back to her, let's say, or to her original passion and the things that motivated her to actually start getting into co-working, and that is culture. And without further ado, Tamara, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for actually dedicating your time to come all the way to Belgrade and to join us here live. We are extremely happy to have you, and I know that I'm saying this not only personally, but on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Uroš. Good morning to everyone. I need to say that I would like to join you in thanking Misha for making this happen. I will not spend too much time in thanking him. He knows what we think, and we have been sharing a lot in the last days as well, not in the last months. Thank you for having me. It is really, really extraordinary that we are today here, because I believe we all share this feeling related to Rovinj. We would be happy to be there, to soak up some sun, to feel the breeze, the sea breeze on our skin. But I promise Rovinj is there. It is waiting for all of you. And I promise we will, as soon as possible, organize something there and meet the community, because it is really the idea of getting together that from where Co-working Rovinj grew up.
That's exactly one of the reasons why I think Misha went into business 13 years ago now, with the idea that getting together and having a community and sharing certain things with people is really what matters and what is important. And then from a business perspective, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's so easy to connect with people who do, certain lines of business that are connected to what you're doing. It's so easy to meet other freelancers who want to meet, but there are other, let's say, reasons why people get together in communities. And I think this is where I'm just going to do a small teaser before we get into more details on this, but you have actually utilized co-working as a method for getting cultural communities together. But before we delve into that, this is just a teaser for everyone watching to know what lies ahead. Can we sort of take a broader look into, because the question is what now, right? So that's the main question that we have for the conference today. And I'll be tackling this with all the panelists and speakers from many different aspects. And you and I have talked also about this before, but can you, as a cultural anthropologist and somebody who sort of looks at culture both on a micro level and a global level, from a global perspective, can you sort of tell us what are the shifts that you're seeing? What has changed? How is culture evolving or changing? What are the global trends? Where do you see things? What have you observed in the past 6 months? Let's say that. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. So whenever I think about what's going on at present times, I always tend to look in the past as well, and I like to look and to learn from history. So this is not the first tectonical change in our economical life, of course. And if we want to look back at some social changes, like the abolishment of slavery, or like technical revolutions like the power steam and then electricity. So the industries changed so drastically in the past, many, many times. We had wars, we had floods, we had different emergencies. This emergency that we are facing in the last 6 months is the first biggest threat to our industry, so to the co-working industry. And if we see this broader perspective, this historical perspective, we really see that people adapt to challenges. And I'm sure that the co-working society, the co-working community really laid ground for it has a perspective in the future. It is really about the prefix co that I really see the future of work in. So in this co-working and in three skills, life skills that are the ground of co-working, and that is solidarity, empathy, and respect, which we grow within our communities. So from these skills or feelings that we cherish among ourselves, I
connecting
think
factors?
Can
we call them connecting factors as well?
Yeah, connecting factors in this industry, which I don't like to call industry, of course, but it is an industry and we do work, but it has some grounds for growing more ethical work perspectives. And I also want to draw your attention to something that I see as the biggest challenge, not only in co-working, but in work generally and in everyday life, and it is the feeling of fear, of insecurity, which is everywhere, present everywhere. And from fear, we really get the potential to move on, the strength to move on. And here comes Misha also with his power. And I think that all of us and all the people following have this power, have this driving power, you know, to go, to learn from each other, to support each other. And here solidarity comes when thinking about what now. So yeah, I think that definitely co-working came as a concept and as an industry in the right moment to support communities in times of crisis.
So you what I take from this, and I think it's actually a beautiful way of looking at things, you're saying, and we often forget about what happened in the past, right? We forget about the lessons because we get so cozy in the way things are, the way that things are comfortable. Internet is running smoothly, businesses are running, airplanes are flying, we can go anywhere we want. You buy an airplane ticket, 3 hours later you are at the other end of the world.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a virus happens. And, you know, it's a change. And I think the fact that there is a narrative this has never happened before is just not true. It has happened before, and we have overcome so many bad things. And now, let's look at the assets that we have, co-working one of them, and see how the tools that we already developed can actually serve a situation in crisis, right? What has been your experience with co-working Rovinj and the community you fostered there?
Yeah, first of all, I would just like to add that the comfort and everything we were used to in our community, in the co-working community, is not reality for everyone, of course. We need to be aware of child work, the abuse of workers in everyday life, and it is really specific position we are talking about, but still, if we on what we can bring to the society, I really think that we can share the idea of solidarity through the co-work, and I really want to emphasize this. So, back to your question on what Rovinj is doing and how is it working in the last 6 months, I have to say that we have been somehow ahead of our time in our community because it is a small community. No one really believed in our idea. We were in 11 at the very beginning. I was just like, oh no, you know, we can have a space, a physical and a mental creative space where we can just join and work together, because there were many people from Brazil, from Ireland, people from Rovinj that lived in different places but wanted to come and to contribute to our society. And then we came together. We spent 2 years in advocating for co-working Rovinj to happen. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the former mayor, Giovanni Sponza, who really, he was like, okay, I don't understand really what are you talking about, but I like what you're talking, and I like what you're saying, and I support your idea. And they really supported, the municipality supported our idea, they gave us the space, so the present mayor supported the idea when he came to govern the city, and I'm really thankful for these people because co-working Rovinj is not usual profit-driven co-working space. So we are supported by the municipality. It is the first civil public
partnership
practice in Istria, but I think also in Croatia, and we are really proud of that because it gives us the possibility to really work as we were supposed to from the very beginning, sharing the values of solidarity and co-working. You know, it's not really, sometimes it's like big words and sometimes even misused concepts, but I have been sitting in many co-working spaces, and I'd like to always to share this. You know, sometimes you have these spaces which are just spaces, and you come there and they say hello, your co-workers, when you have to pay the bill. And this is not about co-working. It is really
It's just the office.
Yeah, and that's just the office. So I don't like to call that co-working. And as I said, it's not about spaces. It's about the activity, the action. Co-working, it is about bringing people together. And even though they are not really working directly on some specific projects, they do share ideas on their everyday, level.
I love when at the very beginning you said it's the it's the CO at the beginning that really matters. And for me, I met Misha in Smart Office.
Yeah.
And for me has always been for connections, but meaningful connections,
Yeah.
right? So you and I have met in Belgrade. We have had many Zoom calls. We were planning the conference, and then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, things changed. But the enthusiasm that we shared on the phone a few days ago and that we shared today is the same. And that's because certain values, as you said, are something that we have not forgotten about and something that should not be forgotten about. And even people who maybe, as you said, you know, maybe fear have taken over, we should rethink, you know, the tools and the assets and the emotions that we have so easily relied on when the times were not the crisis, you know, when it was normal. Yeah. And go back to that and the sense of community and solidarity and sort of take the power out of that to move forward. And then also to see how we can maybe help each other. What has been the experience for co-working Rovinj in the past few months? How things have changed? Let's talk about this. Has the summer happened in a way that you have anticipated or thought it would, or has it been a complete surprise?
It has been a complete surprise, and again, I want to thank Ivana Čehić-Rabljenović for managing the space. She's like the spirit of our co-working.
Yes,
and,
true.
And Marko Obrovac, who was supportive from the very beginning. So they are really, you know, the people there that make it happen. So what happened in Rovinj? Rovinj, and as you know, still today, I think we are the only green region in the world. I don't know how this is possible, but we didn't have really any or few COVID cases in Rovinj. So people just started coming, you know, in June, July, when the borders
opened. Like a green oasis, right?
Yeah, like a green oasis. And we had more than ever people calling, you know, are you open? We would be spending like a month or two in Rovinj and we really need to work, but we want to be in, you know, small cities, not contacting with too many people. So one thing that we at the very beginning thought it's like how to say, not really good for our business, and it is being small, being in a small community, small in terms of the seats we have,
of course.
And being in a remote community, because Rovinj, you know, it is not that easy. to fly to Rovine. We don't have an airport. We do have a small one, and so on and so forth. So people started
There are
to
challenges.
come. Yeah, but the idea of having the beach at a 10-minute walk, to have this beautiful city historical center on a 5-minute walk, you can just work and then go to the beach, and we kept the distance, of course. We had some measures, but the numbers were in July the same as in 2019 for the whole year. So we had a big growth in numbers. Yeah.
So even in times of challenging times, let's put it this way, there are ways to strive and move forward. If you provide value, and if you sort of allow the business, or not the business, but let's say the model, let's not call it a business and an industry, but if you provide a model, an opportunity to adapt to the new challenges, and as you said, we had to take certain precautionary measures, there is separation, but it's still manageable. So I think that is a beautiful lesson in hope, and in sort of a feeling that if there is joint effort put together and with a clear direction of where things are going, things can actually have a positive attitude end of 2020.
Yeah, what I always like to say is to keep it small, keep it smart, and then the sustainability comes in. And again,
small, smart, and sustainable. Triple S. I like that.
And as I said, it's just by case that we are small, but now it turned out to be great to be small.
It's an asset.
Yeah, and then we have a garden, and I think that open air, open spaces are now something that people will tend to look for more and more. Maybe now we are trying to see how to engage also in education, in raising awareness on the digital possibilities. How can we help our community in using, because again, going back to our type of our environment, working environment, we have faced the reality that in Serbia, many children didn't have internet access to follow online schooling.
Course, yes.
Yeah, so and now we are facing, and as a co-working community, I think we can also work with that. And, also working in diminishing the carbon footprint, raising awareness on, okay, we don't have to travel, we can meet as we do. It is great to meet. And we really look forward to our meeting in Rovine. But at this point, we really have to be realistic, and we have to, see what can we take from our practice and how can we move forward. And I say we should move in green spaces, in green directions, like, to try to see how much can we escape the big cities, big places, big crowds, and go small.
Globalization has sort of had a different effect, and I would like this to be, let's say, the final mark of the conversation, to sort of put everything into perspective of the big. But the world has become smaller because we're more connected. And that, if we translate this into concepts that we can follow, small, sustainable, and smart, seems like a catchphrase that a lot of people can utilize to rebrand, revalue, recalibrate their own businesses and their own ideas and their own organizations and their own centers, and sort of think about a smaller scale, let's say a local perspective.
Yeah, I know sometimes it's difficult to think like that. As I said, we are supported by the municipality. Nevertheless, we do have profit, which goes for the organization of the whole space and the people working there. So to find the right balance, I think, is between the values you wish to promote, what you really can do, because we were living, a fast and unsustainable life for ourselves. We were like nervous and, running all over the place and so on. And I think that, COVID gave us the possibility to rethink the way we work, to calm down and to, try to be more connected with our communities and nature. And this is my message, to everyone. If we can look our environment and see how can we work with it.
So going green is the way forward in all the aspects we can think of. Being smart, small, and sustainable seem to be a really good formula for co-working Roving, and I think can actually be a copy-paste mechanism, as weird as it sounds, for a lot of smaller communities to sort of allow themselves the possibility to adapt and to sort of see a challenge in the crisis that we are still facing and that probably is here to stay for the foreseeable future. So adaptation is probably the only way forward.
Yeah, I always like to say that humans are the worst animals because we adapt to everything, you know, so any situation we will find a way, and we are here also today to find ways. So thank you for the opportunity to share my ideas, and I really hope that we will have more discussions.
I'm very thankful that you have allocated time to join us today and to share what I think is really an important story. I am particularly grateful that we have managed to kick off the event with this, because I think it really provides a lot of added value and insight, but also gives us a way of thinking forward with looking back, you know? And that as a message from someone who's a cultural anthropologist, but a co-worker as well, I think it says a lot. And learning from things that happened, going into the future, I'm hoping that these messages are going to reach as wide audience as possible. And the fact that we have a digital event, I think this year is beautiful, because all the messages that we deliver today, we'll be able to watch and rewatch in the days and months to come. So we're leaving a digital footprint, not a carbon footprint, and hopefully leaving a message for everyone to enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Okay, we're now going on with the program, and I'm very happy that in the next segment we're going to have an amazing keynote. An amazing not just because Larisa Halilovic is the one giving the keynote, but that she sort of imbues everything that you would want in an inspiring woman. She is an educator. She's someone who likes to teach. She's also someone who likes to connect, but she is above and beyond an expert on something that we so keenly neglect, and that is emotional intelligence. I invite you to take a very close look and listen carefully to Larisa's keynote words. And after the keynote, we are very lucky to say that she's going to be joining us through Zoom for a small Q&A session afterwards. I'm very excited for the conversation.
Hello.
But I'm even more excited
and
for
thank you for
the keynote
inviting
that
me
is coming
to
up
join you today.
next.
It's a huge pleasure joining you from my piece of peace, somewhere near Sarajevo. When I said I would speak to you at this conference earlier this year, I had absolutely no idea I would be doing it from here. I also had absolutely no idea that for a few months this year, the world would come to stillness, that everything would pause for a while, and that we would have to learn and unlearn so many things. When Misha called me up and asked me, what now? How do we respond to this question? It took me some time to think about what to say to you. But one of the people that actually gave me some of the best questions in order to answer this question was one of the great thought leaders based in Austria, Selma Prodanovic, who asked me, what is it that you loved the most during the time of isolation? And also, what is it that you hated the most during the times of isolation? And in these two questions, possibly you have the response to the big question of what now? But let me rewind back to 9th of March last year, when I did my talk on emotional intelligence in artificial world. Doing the TED Talk on this subject, I had absolutely no idea that at this point, during then future, we would be totally disconnected physically and even more connected through digital technology. The fact that you're watching me now, somewhere out there, and I'm here together with my tool of the future, pickaxe, in my little piece of green heaven, shows me that the world can change just like that. But we have the need and power to develop emotional intelligence. And this is why the message I have is even more important today than it was a year ago when I first did that talk. So do you want to be emotionally intelligent? Or, as my dear colleague Karen Palmer says, would you rather be emotionally stupid? I think we all know the answer, but the question is how? Basically, emotional intelligence means focusing on three things. One of them being yourself, the way you understand yourself, your emotions, your values, where you're coming from, and what these things are telling you. And also others, understanding others, their behaviors, their emotions, their drivers, and understanding the clues you get. The second level is managing yourself, your behaviors, and choosing actions. So the choice is the critical word there. Similarly, you have the power and the need to manage your relationship with others and the way you engage with them. This is even more important now than back in the days when you could hug people, feel their energy, and be physically next to them. But all of you who are part of the CCCSEE co-working and co-living community, I know you figured this out way before many others did. The third level of emotional intelligence that will help you get to what now is motivation. And motivation is something we hear so often, but how many of you really consciously practice motivation and motivating yourself? Figuring out what will make you healthier that day, figuring out what will make you actually get up and go even when you really don't feel like it. Remembering little things that drive you, that make you smile, that bring you joy, and that bring you peace inside. Because this is a big challenge at the time of digital and technological connection that we have at the moment. But it's not only about you, it's also about others, because emotional intelligence has these two dimensions of self and others. So when I say motivation for you as a leader in business, you really need to be able to not only motivate yourself, but also to motivate others. And others who are possibly not there close to you, but others that are somewhere out there in the world, connected, but at the same time possibly disconnected and lonely. This is one of the most critical elements of emotional intelligence that can literally save the world and save the community of today. And in response to Misha's question, what now? My response is, learn how to motivate yourself, but also how to motivate others. So when he called me and asked me, or when he sent the email and asked, Larissa, how are you? This is one of the most powerful tools of actually making a difference in the time of uncertainty and time of rapid change. So I want you to pause for a moment and think about what you can do to motivate yourself and to motivate others when times are tough. One of the ways you can already start practicing this is by focusing on gratitude. and that's what are you grateful for in your life? I know some of you, just like myself, have experienced some really difficult times over the past few months, or maybe over the past few years. And when times are tough, whether it's due to health or a loss of a loved person or some other reason out there, one of the biggest challenges for us is how to get through the day. And it's exactly at these points that we start to uncover the little things that we need to be grateful for and little things that can later help you to motivate yourself. So it really is up to you to look after yourself, to manage yourself, and to manage your motivation. And the next level is to look after others, to manage your relationship with them, and to motivate them as well, especially when times are tough. Because only by reaching out and looking after one another, we can make a difference to the community we are a part of. And this comes from literally rewinding and going back to the basics. Picking up the pickaxe, if this is what's going to make you grounded. Doing your daily exercise. Eating healthy. Taking the time to stop and think and just be calm on the inside. Also taking the time to make a difference to other people's lives. Because by being disconnected physically, we need to be even more connected through other means. And I totally urge you to do that consciously, because this will pass. But your decision to make a difference within your community and to engage in an emotionally intelligent way is what can really help save the community we're all part of. Look after yourself, and I'm sure that you will come out of it better, stronger. And when we rewind to this time, there will be so many things that we will learn from, but life will be better and more beautiful when all of this is part of the moment we can rewind to. Until then, please practice your emotional intelligence. Thank you.
Have Lara for friends, or Larissa for everyone else, here with us. Larissa, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for dedicating time in your super busy schedule. This is one of the 3 workshops you're doing today, right?
That's right. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a huge pleasure to be here, and the sun is shining just for you.
You're bringing all the good vibes along with the sunshine from the keynote to the conversation now. So we are actually the one who are blessed to have you, and we are very happy. We are very happy for the fact that you have decided to join us, to deliver the keynote, and to actually talk about things that we so often neglect, especially in the times like this. It's so easy to, let's say, skip the motivation behind why we are doing certain things. And with this, I would actually like to start. Why have you decided to be part of our digital community for the event and be part pretty much of the history? Because, you know, the video is here to stay. We are leaving a digital footprint. We just discussed that with Tamara. So tell us a bit why you decided to tune in and join us here, and what was the reasoning behind giving the keynote that you did?
So 2 reasons. The first one being that Misha asked me the key question at one of the key moments in the past few months. And that's such a simple question. And it goes, how are you? And that sort of question, and asking that sort of question in this time when people are feeling uncertain and when things are a little bit out of standard, is such an important question. And I feel that we as individuals have the responsibility to ask ourselves that question and to ask others to reach out and ask that question. That was the first reason. And the second reason is when the organizing board asked me, what would you contribute in terms of what now? I thought it's such an important point in time when so many people are asking me to talk about motivation when people are feeling not so motivated, and also about mental health when people are not feeling so well in general. I really do believe that by spreading these important, comforting messages, we can change the digital footprint and we can make people feel better, more relaxed, more confident, and more in line with themselves, basically.
Yeah, I think it's such an important message for people to sort of understand that there is a lot of balancing we can do on the inside if the world is so unbalanced on the outside. And I think it's always whenever there is a challenge that comes from the outside that allows us a bit of time to do introspection and to sort of see, what's clicking on the inside or what's not clicking, and how we can sort of change that, and how we can, let's say, work on ourselves, but not in a way that it's a mandatory thing, but just in a way that it feels natural and it's something that we should be doing. It's always good to use that opportunity, and I think your keynote actually delivers on that beautifully. So my follow-up question is, how can we sort of track down those beautiful patterns between emotional intelligence and motivation? And what are the things that you would suggest as someone who's also coaching for anyone following and tuning in to keep up with that? What are the things that we can do on a daily basis that can help us boost that?
Three things this time around, not two, but three. I was running a workshop earlier this week, and we were exactly talking about how to stay motivated. And basically, one question that I ask people in order to focus in on what motivates them is, what do you like? What makes you happy? Now, it sounds like a really simple question, but when you go to answer it, many people sort of get a little bit stuck. So if I were to ask you, Uroš, what do you like doing? What makes you happy? What brings you joy? What's the first thing that pops to mind?
Drinking wine with friends. That was the first thing that I was thinking of even before you asked the question. Just drinking really good wine with some great friends on my couch, and not thinking about anything else that happens outside of the room.
Thank you. And this is one example of those little things that can make us happy. But it's such an important question to ask ourselves. And many of us have forgotten what it is that makes us happy.
True.
So I would strongly advise everyone to sit down for a few minutes and to literally write down the little things that make us happy, whether it's wine or chocolate, or looking at the nature, or whether it's enjoying a moment of silence in the sun, whether it's the smell of coconut, or whether it's touching flowers and the ground. Whatever it is, the little things, they provide the answer of what brings internal joy and also what motivates us, which is beyond the extrinsic motivation that we are often stuck in. The second thing that I believe really all of us need to start practicing is gratitude. And when I say gratitude, I don't mean following some rigorous ritual, but I mean recognizing every day little things we can be grateful for. Recently, when I was experiencing certain health problems, I was in a state where every day was a big victory. So my gratitude for the day was literally saying, I'm really grateful that I made it through this day. I'm healthy, I'm alive, and yay, we're going for the next day. Now that I'm better, clearly there are many more things, and we can be grateful for little things, really little things. Even the opportunity to talk to you like this, I'm really grateful for. The fact that it's sunny outside, I'm really grateful for. And again, if you haven't done this before, it can seem really bizarre. When I say this in workshops, people sort of look at me and go, what do you mean, practice gratitude? But in reality, practicing gratitude activates feelings of happiness, and it brings balance and calm to our nature, to our personality, to our psyche, and it really contributes to our mental health. especially when we are bombarded with negative information from the external stimuli. And the third, which is probably the most complicated, that's getting to know our own values. Now, when I say values, Urosh, what do you think of?
Ooh, um, I think of being kind to other people. I think of interactions that are moving conversations and relationships for the positive, not for the negative. And I usually think of healthy and productive exchange with people. If we are self-sufficient, and then we choose to interact with others. If that's a choice, then it should be a positive one, right? Not a negative one. So that's the first thing that popped into my head.
Wonderful. Really wonderful. What's really interesting for me is that statistically speaking, out of thousands of people that I have worked with on the subject of values, only about 10% have ever stopped to think about what their own values are. And these are so important for the decisions we make, for the motivation we have, for the choices we make, for the career we choose, for partners we have in our life, for friends we keep, and everything else. Basically, the question you can ask yourself is, what, in your view, makes a good human being? And very often the answers, the characteristics you come up with are some of your core values. There are lots of exercises you can do. If people are interested, they can go and Google a list of 500 top values and choose some of the top ones that they resonate with. But basically, if you are really honest with yourself and if you can discover what your true values are, there is the answer to how to get motivated. Also, there is the answer of what not to let into your life. Because very often, if you are working in conflict with your values, for example, if one of your core values is truth, and you are surrounded by an environment where truth is not a value, you will feel frustrated, you will feel discouraged, you will feel angry, you will feel betrayed. And by knowing your values, you can protect yourself and motivate yourself to make the choices which resonate with you as a person. So these are the top 3 things.
I'm gonna re-listen this conversation a number of times after this, that I promise. And I'm actually gonna stop and think about certain of the things, but knowing that we are on a timestamp, I was sort of giving out answers instantly. But I think it's beautiful to sort of see this, and somebody just tweeted, I saw that we were talking about the CO in co-working, in co-living, in community. Communal aspect is also something that if you're building a community, all of these things can actually help you being in balance with yourself, which in turn pretty much informs how you interact with others. And in order to build a successful and an operational community, a meaningful one, you're actually putting yourself first in the focus. And with doing the exercises that you have just mentioned and talked about, we're pretty much allowing ourselves to build better communities apart from building ourselves up, which I think, is something that a lot of us can take away from. So thank you so much for sharing this. It's always a joy to talk to you. I am beyond grateful that you have blessed us with your participation today, and I say so knowing exactly what I said. Thank you. I think this brings us to the very end, and we're moving to the next panel. Have fun at the other workshops. Everybody here is sending their love, Misha included. Thank you for being, everybody's waving. Thank you, silently though, because we're still live. Thank you for taking the time, and we're looking forward to hosting you in Belgrade and seeing you in person as soon as possible.
I'm sending all my love from Sarajevo. Have a good rest of the conference.
Thank you, Lara. Bye. And we are back to regular programming. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. We are ready for our next panel, that is a freelancing panel, and I would invite my guest that we have here today to join us. Yes, and we're going to allow Coffee to join us, hopefully, with Zoom. Are we live? Can we see each other? Let's start a video. Coffee, are you there? Let's see if we have everyone on board. Hi, Coffee. Really good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to do a small introduction. We were waiting for everyone to be well, the three of us sitting in a room and you joining us virtually. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. So the freelancing panel that we have today is going to focus on on several really important questions. And I think the group of people that we have today is an extraordinary in and of itself. But I think what's even more extraordinary is the experiences that they're going to share with us and some of the key things that we'll be touching upon. So we have Željko Crnjaković, who has been a long-time friend and a supporter, who is running his own community and who has. Thank you so much for joining us in Belgrade today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're always more than welcome, and you know that. You're family for us. We have Pedro, who is actually a host for us today, and he was actually there to provide this beautiful setting and space that we are in, and to understand that this conference actually the value of the conference is also to be able to have the communal area that we're in and to share the story very soon about why Symphony is community, then in the place that we are sitting in. And then we have Coffee, who has joined us from London and who will be touching upon the work that he does with his urban MBA. I'm going to allow you guys to do a round of introductions for yourself. And let's start from this side. Željko, please share a bit of your story. What has motivated you to come here, and why do you think that we think you're the best person for this panel?
I have no idea why do you think I'm the best person for this panel, but thank you for inviting me once again. So I've been in freelance since 2011, somewhere around that, and for the past couple of years, let's say 4 to 5 years, I've been an entrepreneur. I own a small agency, I do video production, and basically the difference between being a freelancer and running an agency isn't that much. I mean, being a one-man show, you're actually a freelancer. Now, I do know that some may disagree, and I think it's a point of view of how you represent yourself, because I don't think of myself as a one-man show. I do have a lot of partners, I do have a lot of people I work with, and I represent myself as a company, so I'm not a classic freelancer looking for work in Upwork, Codesk, or whatever Fiverr platform is out there. I also opened up a co-working space in Subotica, which is a small town near the border with Hungary, about 2013. From that time, it took about 3 to 4 iterations of it, and now I run a community and co-working center in Subotica, Infostud Hub, backed by Infostud, an IT company in Subotica. And I also run a Co-working Values podcast with my friend Bernie from London, and a lot of other things. So basically, I am involved in the freelance world through co-working, through contacts, and through my entrepreneurial business.
So, when you said one-man show, for me that always sounds like a one-man show with a really badass community.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Basically, a one-man show is just a phrase that you have 0 employees except yourself. But, I've learned a long time ago when I was actually a freelancer that when you have projects that require other people, you handle clients, you can do business, you just outreach to other people and share the workload and, basically manage the project as being a regular company with 100 employees. You don't need to have all of them in-house.
True. Okay. Moving forward, we're going to go back. There are
Yeah.
a few points that I noted that I want us to, sort of tackle into the conversation. Coffee, would you take the floor and tell us a bit about yourself, the background you come from, and if you know the reason why we called you. I know the reason why we called you and wanted you to join in again after an amazing keynote you gave last year. But I think the value of what we're sharing here today is really about sort of understanding how, from different angles, different cities and different communities, what are the things that as freelancers, we can sort of take away from as an experience and then share it with others and maybe help the community that we're all a part of just go better.
Okay. So yes, my name's Kofi Opong, and I've been running a charity now called Urban MBA for around 7 or 8 years. But previous to that, my background was specifically retail. So I was right at the beginning, early part of retail in terms of the big boom for sports retail, and in particular, some of the big sporting brands. I worked as a retail manager for 10 years, and then I joined the #1 sports and fitness brand in the world in 1998, and then that was 10 years also pretty much working for them. My history is maybe a bit of the reason why you want me to be here. I had a bit of a checkered upbringing. I was homeless for a long time years ago, and it was that sort of drove me to leave the company I was working for, because I wanted to give back to my community, because I felt like I'd been very, very lucky to have had the life that I've had. And then with what I've learned from the corporate world, it was how can we use that to help people from deprived and marginalized communities actually better get into work or understand where we're going for the future. So I created Urban MBA after I set up a social enterprise, a previous social enterprise 7 years ago. And we are really focused on the style of education that is being provided out there. So millennials in particular struggle with education, and we keep hearing more and more from the parents over in the UK that their kids are not engaging in school. And I feel that it's really important from our aspect to teach in a slightly different way. So we're really focused on storytelling. And so we teach, in particular, entrepreneurship through storytelling. And then what we do is we also provide video footage to accompany that. And that video footage is because they are much more visual, this generation. And so it's important that when you give them any type of training, they get an understanding through a visual style. And that's called blended learning, which is being used in the tech world quite a lot. As well as that, we give them a life and a vocational skill to what they've learned, which allows them to better use it in terms of as they go forward for the future. How I got involved in freelancing and co-working is because we're also very keen on understanding the cycles of business. And whenever there's about to be a new technology coming into the world, it tends to be quite a lot of disruption within the old. And after 2008's financial crisis in the UK, they had something called the flat white economy, which was lots of people who were buying coffees but working from these spaces, and many of them are in the tech world. And it was the fastest growing sector in 2008 in the UK at that time. Now, what always happens is that people from marginalized backgrounds never get into these sectors, and the tech sector tends to be dominated primarily by white middle class, if I may say so. And so it's difficult for those people to break into those areas, and one, they don't have a desire to, because they're not motivated by seeing people in those sectors. But if it's growing at that rate, we need to help them get in there. And so one of the things I wanted to do is understand co-working and also bring that to my community, as it were, so people from marginalized backgrounds, but also look at the next wave of technology that's about to hit, which is about 5G, artificial intelligence, all the things that are going to really, really impact our world. And what COVID has done so far is bring stuff that was supposed to happen in 5 years' time, 5 years forward.
5 years forward, exactly.
Forward. So actually, I'm glad I've been doing what I'm doing, because I now haven't need to really support people. There's less jobs going to be available, that's fact. And the new jobs that are being created, we don't really know what they are fully. So nobody's really teaching them what to prepare for in 10 years' time. And it's really important that from a freelancing perspective and a co-working, that all these things are put in the mix so people have got the opportunities to make the best choices.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the wonderful intro. There are a few things, obviously, that I'll be going back to. But before that, Pedro, would you take the floor and tell us, you have started off doing different jobs. You've been a freelancer at one point in time. Now you're a company man.
Yeah.
But we still have you on the panel. Why?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's really nice to see you again. So we all know each other from the last year. So hi, Coffee. I hope you're really doing great this year.
Hello.
Yeah. Well, people know my name because.
Sorry, just a second. Your audio is not working.
Okay, we have an audio problem. The first technical glitch. No worries. We'll be back. Are we working? Is everything fine?
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can you please start off again?
Okay. First of all, many of you guys, people that are watching us, know my name because I was working as a freelancer for the last 6 years. Recently, I made this big change, so I'm part of this symphony group, and I'm really glad that we can host you here. I have been working and I've been building one of the biggest freelance networks in the world, but the reason why we are sharing these values again with you is that we at Symphony, we believe that, well, first of all, during the crisis and this COVID pandemic situation, we realized that the physical distance is not only thing that is happening between the people. We have a mental distance, we have emotional distance, and the idea and the value of co-working is really important. Not only to gather people at the same place, we do share these values, so we're investing in our people to work together, to share ideas, and that's the reason why we believe that it's important to support ideas like this. Anyway, now I'm in different role now, so I'm head of growth at Symphony, and again, we are growing, and the reason why we believe that this Symphony community is growing is that we do have these values, we do have a vision and a mission of people that can work together and share the same values.
So you have sort of taken, and this probably brings us at a point in time where we can actually do a bit of discussion and delve a bit more into why freelancing is important. You have taken away a lot of the knowledge that you gathered and a lot of the way the freelancers communicate, and you have sort of understood that there is a need for community that can be translated even within a company perspective, right?
Well, of course, but first of all, the Symphony is not a typical company that you can find. We're not a typical corporation. So we are a huge group, but we have a different approach to the people, first of all. We are a community-driven technology house. Some of us, we are working remote. Of course, we are all working remotely now, but even if you are not in a situation like this, you have this flexibility to work remotely. But on the other hand, you need people. So that's the reason why we're building our community and our values. So being together at the same place with your colleagues, your teamworks, that's something that we really believe that's important for people and people development in general.
Yeah, well, co-working works because of that. The exchange of energy that you have with people who are with you in the same space actually provides for, just in terms of, let's connect it with what Larissa was just talking about, the motivation. Obviously, there's a lot of motivation that comes from the inside, but there is motivation and support that comes from the outside as well. So the fact that there's strength in community, the strength in community boosts individuals to, sort of reach their potential in the best possible way. And when we talked about one-man show, we were actually talking about a one-man show with a proper community in the back. So
exactly,
let's talk about this a bit more, because I think for being a freelancer sometimes mean being a lone gunman. Being alone for certain things that you do. That doesn't mean that you need to be alone in everything.
Of course, that's why there are co-workings, and that's why most of us who started co-working spaces, I think we were driven to co-workings because we needed a space where let's go back, a few steps, and this is not related to the pandemic, but there are several kinds of people, or two main kinds of people that go to co-working spaces. One, you don't have the proper environment to work in at home or in the office because there are too many distractions, or you are too lonely and you are one guy sitting in four walls and haven't talked to anybody in 3 weeks. So basically, those are the...
Sounds like a Netflix special.
Those are kind of the two extremes of why people go to co-working spaces and why people open them. Co-working spaces, I know for myself, I was in one of those groups. But co-workings offer, as in any, I'm going to say community-driven company. I like that phrase, even though I heard it the first time today. We have a lot of companies that place value on that. And what we noticed, for example, even in a larger company like Infostud, that basically you can work remotely, and you can even work by not losing too much. Like focus and effort and results. So the results can be there, but what is lacking is the contact between people. There is less innovation. There is less, informal talks with people that you meet for coffee, having a drink of water or having breakfast or lunch. That drives your imagination, that drives your, new ideas, even when you don't know there are new ideas at that time. Because just by asking somebody, what are you doing today? Or what are the problems that you're facing? You may not have a solution, you may have a solution, you may have an, idea for him or an advice, but you get your wheels rolling and some new ideas may come. Maybe that day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But this is something that we don't have when we sit alone at home, under curfew, or just by talking on Zoom calls.
Yeah, exactly. So the community, I would say, fuels so much. And I would like to go back to coffee, to something that you mentioned. We are facing a situation where there is less jobs, right? And then we see situations such as Symphony. You have hired 20 plus people this year, or in the past?
The past 3 months.
In the past 3 months, and you're growing.
And we are still growing, of course.
So,
I would say we have this, we are in the stage of hyper growth at the moment.
So the thing is that there are companies and there are, let's say, movements and innovations and ideas and communities that are growing. And to map out the things that are changing, AI, new technologies, 5G, how do you prepare for that? How can we, let's say, refocus, reshift from a person who just lost a job to how do you move from that to a person looking for new opportunities? Especially if somebody who doesn't have a proper, let's say, proper educational background, but is interested in learning more.
Well, I think firstly you need to know what sectors are trending, and that's why I brought up first and foremost that it was the tech sectors that most of these areas are in. The problems with jobs and even what's happened with co-working, it has affected retail now for the last 10 years, as an example. Retail stores are shrinking. The whole way that you buy product has changed from that aspect. So if you're you need to first find out what sectors are trending, and that's where somewhere like being a freelancer and in co-working spaces can help you, first and foremost. So you need to find that out. And then, as you said, building a community around working out, which are the things that are going to really be big in the next 5 or 10 years. So things like 3D printing. We're getting a lot of stuff happening in the banking world because the APIs, you're getting challenger banks. All of these different jobs are being created due to technology. So you need to find out those sectors first, and then you need to work with other people or find out where to get the information about that sector so that you can see what jobs are available, and that's the only way you can do it. We've had a scenario here where we've had the Chancellor in the UK who said that every single person in the creative industry needs to retrain and be employed and going into employment. Now, for somebody in the creative industry, that you've just virtually put them to sleep in a sense. They don't want to be employed. That's not what they do, and they're in the creative industry. So they now have to look at what's the next things from a creative perspective that's going to come out there that will allow them to then use their skills. If events are not going to be happening anymore, as Zoom has taken over, do you do events in that area? Do you become the person that facilitates those types of things? And that's how you have to think about it. How do you maybe do what you previously did, but with the new technologies coming forward? And I think that's the way that you have to start. But initially, it's what sectors are trending. You can't do the same as 10 years ago. You can't do the same as even 2 years ago now. So you do need to actually look for what's the next thing to come. And then you can start working on what skills you need and how you get about it. Because actually a lot of people don't know what's coming next or are unaware of what's fully taking place. It's not just COVID. This whole tech thing was happening before COVID, and we were always going to get into this position. It's just sort of brought it 5 years forward, as I said earlier.
Yeah, the COVID lens has sort of reshaped the way we see certain things in a way that it has sped up a lot of processes that has already been ongoing. But it's also hindered a lot of things, but then it opened up also a number of opportunities. And you know, we in the earlier talk today we were talking about the importance of as community, but we were also talking, Tamara mentioned small, sustainable, and smart. And maybe that is something that, you know, for a freelancer, being small, sustainable, and smart, rethinking that and sort of branching out to the community, as you said, in a co-working space, might actually be a really good idea to sort of rethink how the tech that you have and the tech that is coming can help you reshape the work that you've been doing up until this point, and then maybe transition the knowledge that you already have and use the tools that technology provides into something that is new, more meaningful, different in a way. How has, and on this point actually, Pedro, I would like to go back to you. How do you see the trends, not only for Symphony, but just in the way the tech is going? How do you see the trends in the upcoming, let's say, 6 months to a year, apart from the exponential growth that you guys are experiencing? How do you see the landscape changing?
Well, first of all, at the beginning of this crazy situation, I realized there was a huge drop down in the freelance market. So from the beginning of March up to June, there was a huge drop down. Then I would say that the freelance market was pretty much stable. But as I mentioned at the beginning, people were looking for a connection, to be connected with something. So that's why we can all agree that the community is important. Why is that important? So we have distances between the people. We have emotional and mental distances, and we're losing our creative ideas. First of all, when I decided to make this change, I was looking for something different, something that can drive me through my goals, through my ideas, and I realized that this is something where I can grow. I can grow in an environment like this. I believe personally that most of people are sharing my thoughts. If you're not, so feel free to tell me. But anyway, how is this affecting the growth? I believe that the companies like this and the community-driven companies will grow. Also, there will be some consequences with the freelance market. Of course, people need to change their minds. They have to adapt to this new normal situation. So we are living in the age of the new normal. So we don't know what we can expect in the next 6 months. It's impossible to predict what's going to be. So I believe personally that we all have to adapt to this new situation. If you have been, well, of course, there is a huge growth in the digital markets. So we know that some markets are still going down, but in the digital market, we still have a huge growth. Not only in engineering, in digital marketing, in engineering worlds, everything which is related to any digital technology, the market is growing and expanding. But if we are talking about what we can expect, I have no idea what we can expect. It's impossible to predict. We're just living in this new normal situation, and we have to be creative as a people to adopt our skills to this new situation and try to be as productive as possible.
Okay, let's do a bit of symbolism. So let's do the triple C, right? There is community and being pretty much looking out to find ideas and to pretty much balance out yourself with the community that you have and or the community you want to create. There is creativity in terms of how you apply the new technologies to the new normal, and how do you look into what the future holds. And what would be the third C?
Yeah, from the back room, connectivity.
We have bystanders who are sort of giving out a few ideas, but it's really good. Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, tell us what the third C is.
Connectivity.
Connectivity. Okay.
What we heard, but I want to go back to actual freelancers, because the pandemic is like any other. It's not like any other, but it's like a wave that hits any entrepreneur every year. The only difference is that we don't know when is it going to end, and it's affecting all of us.
Or if it's going to end.
Or if it's going to end. To put it more simply, as you just said, so like Pedro said, the main characteristic of an entrepreneur and a freelancer is an entrepreneur, with the only difference that he may not have the capital or the scale to weather the storm, depending on how long it lasts, is a way or a kind of his own possibility to adapt to certain problems. And the pandemic isn't a problem as a virus, it's a problem in economics. And when the world shut down, the economic shut down. And unlike the crisis in 2008, when everything happened very fast, people, and by people I mean large companies, knew where is the bottom. Where we hit the bottom, so we're going to plan on how to climb out. And freelancers, as a small gig community, depend on large players, because these are the clients. These are the people who pay their projects and pay their bills. Freelancers are rarely hired by other small freelancers, most of the kind. So the problem now is we don't know where's the bottom, and the big players, when everything shut down, they stopped spending and try to save money. And as Pedro said, in June, July...
You said twice my name.
Yeah, so. Of course. So I'm bringing...
We're dropping Pedro's name all the time.
I'm bringing into the conversation because they started spending money in June, July, because the world needs to revolve and everything needs to come back in a sort of way. And then the line started going up. What's now important is that freelancers have a big possibility in front of them, because we still don't know where's the bottom, and the large players are still kind of hesitant of large investments in projects that are totally new to them. They're turning to the gig economy, so they won't hire a full in-house new development team for something that they haven't so far built, or that their business
they're unfamiliar with,
isn't built on. So, for example, video production. Sorry. So you won't develop an in-house video production team. You're going to go to a video production agency, pay for a project, and that happens with a lot of other services, translations, web development projects, and a lot of other stuff for businesses that isn't their core business. So the gig economy is actually going to boom over the next period.
But there might be another, sorry Peter, just to point out something that you said, and to connect to something that we actually talked about, and I actually talked about to coffee yesterday. it was the power of the community also lies in the fact that freelancers can now maybe depend one on each other more, and to create smaller communities that can interconnect. And maybe, you know, I cannot pay you as I cannot pay your video production fee as a large company, but I may need video material that is of good quality, and maybe I can help you out by, you know, maybe we can exchange services. Maybe we can sort of do it in a way where you don't earn as much as you would from a large company, but I still recognize that there is a need for, you know, that there is a need for the exchange of the services that we can provide.
I'm just going to say this one point. So, as I mentioned, the pandemic is as any, you know, every year as an entrepreneur, I had ups and downs. So they lasted 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And the way to adapt is to develop, either to weather the storm or to develop new services. So, for example, in the first months of the economic crisis this year, I developed, you know, tons of services that were already there, but they weren't like systematically, you know, shown on paper. And maybe smaller services, like, you know, like you said, I don't need a big project. I just need to turn the cash flow. And a lot of freelancers need to do the same. They need to look at their services, and if one thing isn't going, think about how they're going to spin it, how they're going to break it down into smaller services and still work on it.
Do we have coffee, or we lost your coffee?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. I don't see you but I'm glad that you're still here.
I'm still here.
I
Can
just wanted to say something. Still, we have a huge drop down in the freelance market outside the digital and IT business in general. So what's going to be with the people who are not prepared for these changes? So
Digitalization.
digitalization is definitely one of the solutions for them.
Exactly. Now it sort of comes as a mandatory thing. If you preferred being analog, now is the time that you put your preferences aside and go digital. In the same way that I had to do to explain to Misha that an event can be digital. And one of the reasons why we're sitting here today is because I had lengthy discussions with him to tell him that there is value in doing a digital event. But Coffee, can we go back to how the community responds to these kind of shifts, and where do you sort of see the trends with people, or how do you reflect on this particular exchange? I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I talked about, and you mentioned earlier on as well, about an exchange of values. I think the one thing about the creative, being creative, is that you can use that creativity to create new services, as was being talked about. But when you're in a community, and some of these co-working and freelancing space, I come from the issue of diversity. So some of these spaces are in communities, but are not connecting with local communities. So the other thing that they need to do is they need to potentially gain a champion or somebody who can do that and connect with the community and say that we're offering these services, and that will better support freelancers. But I think when there's more diversity in what's being shown also in any company that's got a lot of different cultures in it, is that that company actually makes more money. That same thing should apply to a freelance community in exactly the same way. You want lots of different cultures and lots of people with lots of different ideas, which can help you pivot your idea then into whether it needs to be digital, whether your idea that you've ran previously and it's event-based can go online, etc. But I think there's a big merit now for co-working spaces with freelancers to connect with that local community, as you said, and get different types of people in there, because you're all going to need those different skills or that community to come out of this and to learn how to pivot, to understand what's next coming, which is what we're talking about. So how do you get that information? It's just when you're around more people, somebody else has a different bit of knowledge, your knowledge connects with theirs, and then you can then see how you can better your service or gain that service to maybe work with a big corporate, as Zekro was saying, or to provide different services. But it's very, very important that the communities are created, and that with the co-working space that they have, talk to different freelancers. We are having in the UK right now, I think the prediction is that there's going to be maybe 30-40% of young people between the ages of 18 to 24 potentially are not going to have work by Christmas. All of a sudden, that's a new freelance market there. So they're all scrambling around wondering what to do, and they need to get into this scenario here. And then the last point about this co-working in this community of freelancers is what's been discussed is the resilience. Like I said, these have very bad periods, 3 to 6 months, where you don't have cash flow or you don't have money coming in. You need to be in this world of the freelancer, you need huge resilience. And the best way to be able to get that is also to have people around you, so that when you are having those tough times, you can speak to other people as well, and that can then keep you going. But it's a very lonely business, and if you don't tackle that area of resilience and make sure that you can survive through this, you won't. And that's why it's so tough to be a freelancer or an entrepreneur, because those problems and even assessing what your cash flow is for the next 6 to 12 months is not something that's taught to you naturally. And so you're having to learn these types of skills in order to go forward. So, yeah, I think that the one thing I would advocate is that more people go out into the community and actually find out what's there, because it's remarkable how many spaces I've gone to in the UK that are in the middle of areas, and they seem to attract the same type of people that you would get in an area like the tech belt that we have in Shoreditch, as an example, in the UK.
And then to take away from this, I would like to actually, exactly what Coffee was saying, the triple C. We talked about connections, which is really important in connecting out and branching out to new people in the new communities that you were not maybe a part of before. To have strength in the community that you already have, but help others build a community with you or around you. And what was the other C? Creativity. To use the new technologies and to just, if you have not been digital before, become digital now.
Go digital, definitely.
Thank you so much, guys, for a wonderful conversation. This brings us to the end of the panel. We have extended the time a bit, but I thought that for the benefit of the discussion, this made a lot of sense. Thank you, Kofi, again for joining us. We are now going to go into the next keynote. Thank you, guys, for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to getting all the feedback afterwards with the Q&A, and hopefully maybe we're going to have even some extended questions afterwards for you guys. But I'm hoping this instills a lot of conversations after the conference itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back to regular programming. I am just going to end this session. Thank you, Kofi, again. The next thing we have is a person that Misha was actually super happy to lock in for the event. We have a great friend and supporter of ours, but somebody who is not only a startup founder of Indie Hall in the US, but is someone who is always looking at the opportunities in an inspiring and new way. Alex Hillman is going to share his keynote, and then he's going to tune in live for some Q&A and some exchange with us. And if I am not mistaken, we can go into the keynote.
What now?
Right
Maybe
now.
what next? And so what? That second one's especially tricky. Calls a lot of things into question and asks us to challenge some things. And presents me with a challenge of how I can be informative, maybe try to be a little bit inspirational in a year where we could use a little bit of that, but also to ask these hard questions. What now? And so what? And I have to approach this challenge with the additional challenge of doing this as an American, where in America, things are distinctly troubling. My views will be coming from my experience as an American in America, but my interests are fundamentally human and global. And you may need to interpret some of what I want to share to your region, but I'm going to urge you to avoid pretending that your region is immune to these concerns and questions, because America pretended that it was immune to these concerns and questions. That's how we got in this mess to begin with. So I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this. This has been a hard year on so many levels, a year with an unknowable future. It's not that somebody else knows and we don't. Nobody knows what comes next. We're facing hardships and uncertainty at a scale, and depending on who you are, where you are, is disproportionate to things that we're used to seeing or even really understanding. So it's hard to get our heads wrapped around. But not just our own hardships and uncertainty, but the members of our community facing those hardships and uncertainty as well. So, that compounds the challenge. These are also existential times. I can't think of a better word than existential when we're talking about what's happened this year. On a micro scale, co-working spaces are closed. Some of them are staying closed for a long time, possibly forever. My co-working space has been closed for 6 months. We closed it the day before our state government mandated us to. And we're likely going to remain closed at least through the end of the year into early 2021, which means we also have mounting debt to a landlord who thinks that we're going to pay that full rent. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But besides the financial concerns, we're forced to answer the most existential questions, which are who we are, what do we do, and why do we do it? And that's what I want to talk about today. Remembering that this is not my first existential crisis. It's most certainly our biggest to date, but we've survived for 14 years, which is how we've thrived for 14 years. You have to survive before you thrive. And in order to do that, we've come up with a few elements of a playbook that have worked well for us in the past and are a big part of how we're making decisions now. And a thing that I constantly remind myself and my team and our community is that while I don't know how things are going to go, the only way that we fuck this up is by losing sight of what really matters. So I want to talk about that. If you've heard me speak or read any of my articles or had a conversation with me or an email exchange with me, you know that there's only one thing that matters in co-working, and that's the people. And I'm torn on this because I think we've done a good job of getting people to say the words of the community being the most important thing. But if I'm going to be honest, I'm not totally convinced that most people really know what that means or put it into practice beyond the marketing. And I can prove it to you with a simple question. How do you take a photo of your community right now? What does that picture look like when you don't have a space to provide it a backdrop? It's an interesting question, isn't it? But I want to zoom out even further. Because I get a lot of emails. Some of them are from you. Thanks for sending those. I like them. I'd say about 1 in 3 emails that I get about co-working are some version of the same basic question. And it basically comes down to, I read your post about building the community first, and it makes so much sense. And sometimes this is people who are getting started and they realize that they can start on the right foot. Other times it's people doing some course correction and realizing they should have built the community first. And now they've just simply delayed the inevitable. But in all cases, by the time somebody is writing me an email about building the community first, it's because something in their situation is special. They've already got a building or a location in mind, or they've got a business partner who's got some special angle, and they're convinced that if they can just get the space open first, that people will start showing up like magic. And this is the part where if we were in person, the audience would chuckle, because as much as I know, that that's not how it works. Nobody just magically shows up because you unlocked the door and said, come on by. It just doesn't work that way. But recently, over the last several months, I've been getting a new kind of email. And the email says something to the effect of, I read your advice about building the community first, and it makes a lot of sense. But how do we do that when we can't host in-person meetups and events? It's another really interesting question, isn't it? Because the framing's all wrong. The question's about the meetup instead of about the people. It asks, how do I do a seemingly impossible thing that I didn't really want to do in the first place, but you told me I'm supposed to? Instead of a much simpler and straightforward question, which is, what do people and communities need while it's unsafe to attend in-person meetups, and while it's unsafe to work from co-working spaces, shared workspaces. And let's be clear here, COVID is undeniably destroying lives. But even more than killing people and making them sick, COVID is showing us the parts of our systems and society that are already weak and broken, and in many cases have been weak and broken for a really long time. I'm talking about economic and social systems that don't provide safety nets and have made it clear that rich people with white-collar jobs can work from home, but poor people with blue-collar jobs, they have to go work on the front lines, putting themselves, each other, and their families at risk. We've got healthcare systems, especially in America. It's bad in a lot of places, but in America, we've got clearly understaffed systems, underprepared systems that are structurally unable to keep up with the wave of sick people that they're seeing. We've got supply chains that are completely upended, making food prices fluctuate, hard for restaurants, hard for consumers, and everyday goods are unavailable for months at a time. My wife and I tried to buy a backup refrigerator and couldn't get anything because the supply chain is so out of whack that ordering something today means I won't get it for over 6 months. Something as simple and silly as a refrigerator. And governments. Don't get me started on governments, but everywhere, but especially the ones led by an adult-sized toddler with a Twitter account, unable to muster the political willpower to keep their citizens safe. We're learning so quickly and in so many ways, painfully, deeply painfully, that the things that we depend on the most weren't all that dependable to begin with. And so for me, COVID is like a tracing dye being injected into our society, like the tracing dye that gets injected into cancer patients to make their tumors show up on film. COVID is just showing the parts that are sick, not just the people. And if we come back to the world of co-working, it's no different. I watched operators of co-working spaces here in America, but around the world, delay closing their doors to their members until their government mandated it, even though it was clearly in their members' best interest for them to stay home. I watched spaces then leap to spend small fortunes on plexiglass dividers and buckets of hand sanitizer, hopeful that members would come back a little bit sooner, instead of seeing that a space with all the best safety precautions in the world, that a space designed to bring people together is a safety risk right now. And maybe most frustratingly, I watched webinar after webinar marketing things like how to sell virtual office memberships, instead of asking the simple and most critical question, what do the people in our community need now, so that they're even around to be our members in the future? And that's what we asked ourselves at Indie Hall. Within those first couple of days, we knew we were going to have to close. We asked ourselves, what are our priorities and where are we going from here? And we made it clear to our community that our top priority is making sure that they were safe and supported. Not getting them to come in and use the workspace, not getting them to keep paying membership, to make sure that they were safe and supported in one of the scariest, most challenging times they may have faced in their entire lives. We shifted 100% of our energy into safe online resources to bring our members together and help them help each other. Something we've always done. But now it's got 100% of our energy. Part of the other piece of that is that it's not us doing everything. And you've probably heard me talk about this before. This is not us providing services for people. This is us providing platforms for people to help each other. That's at the heart of what has always worked. Do all of our members participate? Of course not. Not all of our members participated in the co-working space either. But the ones who are participating now are telling us on a daily basis that Indie Hall has become a critical lifeline for staying both socially and professionally connected, staying calm and sane and feeling supported, like there's even the potential for them to come out of this on the other side. And many other people tell us that even if they're not using it, how glad they are to know that it's there if and when they need it. We also made it clear to our community that our second priority was keeping our staff employed by any means necessary. Our community values the team. The community knows that Indie Hall can't tick without the human support of the team. And so we made it clear that our financial priority was our team's employment, and the community responded with the desire to support however they could. Not pay the rent, but pay the staff. Which brings me to the third point about our priorities, which is that we also made it clear that our landlord is the last priority. And if there's any landlords watching, you're not going to like hearing that. But we made it clear to our landlord that our members want to come back once it's safe. So it's in the landlord's best interest and our best interest, our mutual best interest, to not bankrupt us with the mounting debt of the months that we can't use the space. Us staying solvent is the landlord's fastest path to seeing any amount of money, and avoiding the scenario where bankrupting us puts the empty space back on the market where they're competing with everybody else for a tiny pool of tenants. Meanwhile, we've been bankrupted as a byproduct. We focused all the resources that we have, everything we've built up over the years. That's financial, that's physical resources, tools that we have, making those tools available to members who are setting up a at-home workstation. Need a monitor? You can borrow one of ours. You need a desk? You can borrow one of ours. The stuff we've got, why not make it available? And not to keep charging, but to make sure people can continue moving forward for however long they need to, so that when we come back, there's a thing to come back to. But more than the stuff, we focused on that sense of togetherness and belonging that we always have. We focused on a professional and social networks where you can build trust and relationships and earn knowledge and opportunities before you need them. If you wait to when you need them, often it's too late. And we focused on the deep well of collaborative potential that we know exists within a community like ours, where everyone has the potential to contribute to solving somebody else's problem. The net value is the people, period. Maybe most critically, Indie Hall exists to help people form relationships and bonds, however it needs to happen. But over the last 6 months, we've been hearing almost every week from a member who says that they've formed more bonds and stronger bonds over the last 6 months online than they did over the previous months or years being a member of a co-working space where they're coming in on a regular basis. Once a week, 3 days a week, even full-time members, feeling closer to other members through our online community than they did going into the physical space. So I do not believe it when you tell me that a physical space is necessary to do the things that we do. So here comes the real talk. A lot of people have adopted language around community and events and meetups, but they only use it as an excuse to sell their shiny shared workspaces. They didn't care about who showed up so long as somebody showed up. And now, people see the space as a risk instead of an asset. The space part of co-working spaces has always been more of a risk than an asset. It's been a distraction from the stuff that matters the most. It's expensive, it's hard to maintain, it's the part that everybody's going to copy, turning what you offer into a race to the bottom. And maybe, thankfully, 2020 just slapped us all back to reality. Yeah, I said thankfully. Let's look at this conference as an example. What normally happens at a co-working conference? You get speakers on stage telling stories, talking about their work, their examples to teach and inspire. You've sponsors selling, furniture and software? And you've got, in the best cases, conferences like this one. I heard so many great things about this event last year. I was so sad to miss it in person then, and I'm so mad that we can't be together right now. Because in the best cases, you've got the people, the vibe, a shared excitement about what's possible and what we can do together. So what happens in an online conference? What's left when you take away the physical space? You get stories, you get relationships, and you get a focus on right now, what's right in front of us, with no distractions. And that's all thanks to 2020, a year full of horror and anxiety and pain and death and loss. Some of our biggest distractions are gone too. Maybe that's a blessing. Now look, I'm not saying this year is easy, or that the future will be either. I'm saying that if you actually look around, it's never been clearer what matters and what doesn't. Let's not waste that. Instead of focusing on how to reopen your space or the land rush for all of these new remote workers and how you're going to create spaces for them, focus on your community again. Maybe for the first time. Know who you're serving. Find out who your community really is. Find out what they need, how they hurt, what you can do to make sure that they're there in the future. It's not too late to reconnect. Go find out how the people you've abandoned are actually doing. Thanks.
Okay, we are live after the keynote with Alex Hillman, who's got up super early to join us today, and is here with us. Very happy to have him here. Hi, Alex. Thank you for tuning in.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no
Hi.
worries. He's probably commenting on our YouTube feed. That's really good.
I was just commenting on the YouTube feed. That's
Exactly.
exactly what was happening.
Thank you so much. You know, this is like, it feels a bit like Inception, you know, screen within a screen within a screen.
It's so true.
Thank you so much for tuning in live. First of all, thank you for giving a damn, just to use the words that you have in the back, and then for sort of being ready to tune into our own time zone, get up super early, get enough caffeine in, and then you've been super active on the YouTube feed. Thank you so much for that. I think the community aspect of it is that we support each other, even with the time difference that we are facing. So thank you so much for all the effort. Before we get into specifics, and first of all, thank you for delivering this keynote. I think for me, it has been super informative, but also very interesting to see how you sort of wired certain things together into what for me was a very, it was a moving and inspiring story, but also a real one, if I can put it this way. And I think that the reality of things is something that I would love to tackle with you. We briefly discussed a few of these points, but I think that the key word that we agreed on was like the safety. How do you provide safety? And first of all, let's start with what safety means for you. How do you put it in the context of Indie Hall, of the way that you deal with your communities and the way that you do your things?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Well, also thank you in return for having me, for being an awesome host and moderator of this event, and for giving me sort of the platform to share this and the challenge. It was a really kind of, or especially as this year evolved, to sit down and go, what do I want to say to my fellow co-working people that is productive but also honest? And if I'm totally honest, like when I look outside, I don't have a lot of nice and productive things to say. So to try and weave that sort of honest place of frustration that I have with a lot of the broader ecosystem, and that I feel myself with, I think we're all sharing that frustration. Like, we've been burdened with these challenges. But I think the way I remind myself and sort of get out of that hole and create something useful is to remind myself that, I'm not the only one facing those challenges, and that we're all facing those challenges. Sure. And to your point, back to bringing this all the way back to safety, that our members are facing those challenges too. And I really kind of wanted to recenter the members in the conversation instead of co-working abstractly or even things like that. So with that context in mind, when I was flying back from the CU Asia conference in Bali when the world was kind of crumbling. Obviously, COVID was already, spiking in parts of Asia and Italy, and we were kind of watching America just start to take it seriously. Some other parts of Europe start to take it seriously. And I remember very distinctly the very first feelings that I had where I was like, this is terrifying. And that was different from, oh shoot, this is going to impact the business. It was, oh shoot, this could kill somebody in my community. And then I had to step back another moment and go, how are the members of our community processing the fact that they might be having that thought too? And as soon as I realized that, I was like, that is the environment that matters so much more. Things like the physical safety of a space, if people are going to inhabit it, is obviously critical, but I also think it's table stakes. It's how do people view each other in a space? And we're seeing this on such a different scale, when it comes to the U.S. politics and election right now, is people don't feel safe around each other, not just physically, but emotionally. And so if I think about the sense of safety that we've put the majority of our energy on. We said, all right, if really all we can do in terms of physical safety is table stakes, like I can't make an unsafe place safe. I can just make it less unsafe.
Yeah.
Which I think is the reality of all the physical places that we're dealing with. Like the virus doesn't care how much you spent on plexiglass and hand sanitizer.
True. So true.
What matters then is how do people feel unsafe wherever they are, which will, they don't need to be in our space to feel unsafe. They can feel unsafe at home. And so what can we be for each other? And, a couple of the things that we did early on was hosting. Initially, I didn't even know what to call it or how to frame it. We just sort of called, one of our sort of core tools is a community town hall, right? Hey, everybody, we're coming together to try to talk about what's going on, really kind of understand the problem together and brainstorm together. We've done that to solve endless other problems before, everything related to financial challenges, to physical relocations, to redesign, like co-designing our way out of problems has always been one of our go-to answers. And so, we sort of went back to that. And what was different about these town halls is they ended up sort of unfolding into more like group therapy, if I'm being completely honest. And they were the first opportunity for people to feel safe among a group of peers and say what they were thinking, say what they were feeling, say what they were worried about, and realize that they weren't the only ones. Even if we didn't have an answer, to realize you're not alone. And when I saw that happen, that reminded me of why Indie Hall exists, why Indie Hall matters, why co-working matters, is for people to realize, oh, it's not just me. I'm not alone. And that when you have that as the foundation for work and exploring new ideas and for collaboration, the work, the new ideas, and the collaborations that come out of it are so much richer and frankly, I think even just possible. Like, I don't think you can really get new ideas and collaboration if you don't have that sense of emotional safety. Yeah. So I feel like it's something we've always done, but all of a sudden it was the only thing we could do. Every other tool we had was kind of taken away from us overnight. We said, well, do we have anything left? And we realized that people feeling safe around each other to open up about fear and challenges, and then realize that this could stretch on and these challenges could shape and grow. Well, if we invest in that, then no matter how this goes, people will see Indie Hall and each other as a place where they can come when they feel unsafe, when they feel worried, when they feel threatened. It's a place they can come and be and find themselves again. And one of the nice things about that, nice is probably not the right word for it, one of the hopeful things out of that, I would say maybe, is that's a skill that if we spend this entire pandemic practicing, when the pandemic is over, which will happen at some point, we will have spent months practicing that skill, and those skills are going to be, they're essential in every period of time of work and business and economics. They will be even more essential, but we will have a running start, and everyone in our community will too.
I think it's a beautiful image when you were talking about it, and I'm also going to go back to a few things you said, co-designing our way out of a problem. And when you said, like, it's so easy for people to share how they're feeling when it's a negative emotion, there's like this attune, that people just sort of get in sync. And I think that, like an emotional chant, if we can call it like that, like if everybody's humming, everybody's humming to the same tune or like on the same note, and then everybody's sort of tuning in, and then it creates a melody, right? But it also creates like a bass note for you to start to create whatever that it is, the way out of it. And I think what you said at the very beginning, and I think that is something that is maybe you have probably done it like in an automatic way, just because of being in a position where you had to handle community-related problems beforehand, and hence the experience that you have. But you said, like, I'm stepping back and thinking about the members who are sharing the same emotional crisis within and how they are feeling. And I think stepping back in a community and allowing yourself to, the bird's eye view of certain things really gives you the opportunity to see in what way, and then again to use what you said, how we can co-design our way out of a problem. Do you think that this is a strength that we are maybe not even aware of in terms of what happens when the pandemic stops? Because you said something, and at least for me, this may be, the safety that we provide may be something that anybody who is in the co-working industry can look at safety as a way to attune communities to become even more strongly connected. So when the pandemic is over, you actually have a super strongly connected hub that then can, in the new normal, after the new normal, create opportunities instead of facing challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part is getting started. If this is not something that is already happening, or is, and I would argue in most cases when it's not happening, it actually is happening, but it's happening somewhere that you can't see, and that's on purpose. It's because people don't feel safe, right? If you don't see it, I guarantee you it's happening, but it's happening out of view in a private channel, or a WhatsApp or Slack or whatever it is, and people are doing it there and not in a public channel because they don't feel safe. And this is not the time to beat yourself up for that. It's the time to say, well, what can I do to change that? So I think, to your point, I think stepping back and acknowledging and asking the questions instead of telling people what to feel or how it's going to go. I said up front to our community, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm just as scared as you are. But I do know that we get through things like this together. And, the only thing I can promise you is that I'm not gonna abandon you. And if you ask for help with something, that I can't promise that I'm the one who knows how to solve it, but somebody in this community does. And I think that's the power that people talk about and then forget to use, right? The people in a position of leadership find themselves being the ones that everybody comes to for answers, and they forget to say, well, why are you asking me? There's all these other smart people in the community. Let's ask them too. And so making sure that our instincts and reflexes are tuned to problem solving in that way. And it's like, this is super, super hard. In some cases it's because we want to be the hero. Let's be honest.
Sure.
But other times it's just I think there's also instincts around, depending on how the business was established and the expectations and the relationship between you and the members or clients or tenants or however that's framed for you, is the more it is on the service end of the spectrum, the harder it is to break the habits around being the concierge.
Yeah.
Right? This is not the time to be the concierge. This is the time to be the community leader. This is the time to be the person who keeps a view, keeps that like the most valuable thing you can do is have a bird's eye view of the sort of different pockets of activity and the good things that are happening, the challenging things that are happening. Who are the people in those pockets? How are they interacting with each other? How are they helping each other? And be on the lookout for extreme changes in either direction. So we've seen, positive things emerge within the community. When we see something good happen, we embrace it and we call attention to it, and we look for ways to provide infrastructure and support. And whether that's something as simple as, at this point, we have a literally daily rhythm of coffee chats that people can plug into. And for those to be reliable, it sounds really silly, but I've heard people talk about no one shows up to their Zoom chats anymore. And I'm like, well, it's because you put you at the middle of it. No one, people are bored looking at you.
Sure.
And that's not your fault, but to a degree, it is your fault because you put yourself at the middle of it and say, I'm going to host coffee chat. And so ours now has got different members hosting every day of the weekend, a rotating schedule. And that took time to cultivate. And we know what we're doing. So this stuff will take time. The advantage right now is the pandemic is also going to take time. So there's no reason to hurry. The other thing that I want to point out though is bad stuff's going to happen too. As when you've got that bird's eye view, You're going to see people who are stressed out, that something terrible happens in their business. They lose their biggest client, or someone in their family is really sick, or like we have a lot of things to be afraid of, right? People bringing those emotions to the space can be done in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. And I've seen both. And
that's actually the
people-
safety when you talked about it. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's the
No,
safety.
please.
That's the safety that you talked about. It, like the vibration and how you deal with it as a community leader, stepping back and looking at things, is understanding how a tectonic shift like that can also provide an insight of how community is strong.
That's right. Yeah, I think one of the examples recently was we had a couple of people, and it was a weird, like, once one domino fell, a couple more fell. A couple of folks who were just like going through some really gnarly stuff, and all it took was one person looking at them the wrong way, and they just lashed out. And we've all seen this happen, right? And sometimes we want to acknowledge it, and other times we don't. And sometimes we just kind of want to, like, you know, sweep it under the rug and be like, well, that was awkward. The trouble is the sweeping it under the rug and going, that was awkward, creates a sense of emotional unsafety, right? Because now people are walking around going, wait, is that behavior normal? Should I expect that to happen? Is that okay? And what we had to do was look at situations with longtime members, people who the community are very familiar with, acting in a way that is not only unacceptable in any time, but especially unacceptable now, and say, hey, like, this is not okay. You can stop or you can leave. Those are your only two options. And being willing to do that. And the other thing about an online space that's different from a physical space is in a physical space, the only people who see it are the people who are in the room. In an online space, everyone sees it. It's in the chat transcript. It's in the record. You know, it's like it will reverberate in different ways online than it does in person. More people will see it, and it will create that sense of unsafety for more people. And so it's even more important to address it head on and be like, this is not okay. If anybody else wants to behave this way, you can go find the door, because that every person who wants to act that way and get away with it is a liability for everyone who's there and sees that place that we share in virtual space as one of our members is referred to Indy Hall as an island, right? Which is tricky because I don't want us to be insular, right? That's very important. Previous conversation from Kofi about, you know, being a part of our nearby external local communities, super, super important. But that doesn't mean we can't be an island emotionally, in the sense that it's a place where people know that they can go and get even just a few moments of calm and support, and that people are gonna, and they get in a world full of people who are only trying to get their own and not looking out for each other. We can create this one place where people are still looking out for each other, and who do step up when needed or asked. And if that's the association people have with us, that's going to benefit our members now, but also the long-term benefits of that. This isn't just about retaining members now. This is about making sure that our members are the best people, like are the best they can be to get to the other side of this, and to get through it together.
It goes up to preserving a community, or even not even preserving a community, but making a community better and stronger, so that any of the challenges that are coming with the second, third, fourth, fifth wave post-pandemic, whatever that it is that's in the cards for the future, you as a community can cope with more, right? If it's stronger. And then when you said, like, you don't want to be an island just because it's insular, but an island that has a lot of bridges, and that has like a premium kayaking service to take you from one shore to another, or an island that is a member of the group of islands who are also like closely connected, but sort of having their own specifics, is, I think it's a way forward. And then the digital allows us to move that up, right? And to provide a community that people can become member of. We were doing this digital event because there is a possibility to do the connection. And to what you said, things stay in transcripts. That's exactly where I would like us to end this exchange with a final thought from you. You said safety is, it permeates the physical safety that we can provide, and it goes on so many different levels, and then it exponentially extends the moment we put digital into it, because it stays there forever. And it's available, and if it's a positive vibe, it keeps spreading positive vibes. If it's not a positive vibe, then it's just going to keep spreading negativity. And if we can sort of filter that out of a community and allow community to breathe in a right way, maybe that is something that we can take away from as how to do safety for the future communities that we're building and the communities we're part of, or the communities that are changing into something else in the future.
There's I think about the early days of Twitter. I've been on Twitter since like 2006. So like when we're talking like when there were tens of thousands of people, not hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And what cultural events felt like. And it wasn't everybody yelling at each other. It was sort of like having a group text with the world when something happened, whether it was good or bad. So like when your sports team wins, or like I remember when Obama won the presidency in 2008. Being on Twitter was one of the most connected feelings I'd ever experienced. I'm thinking now recently when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, our Supreme Court Justice, and I opened up our chat room and to a bunch of people who saw the same news, and their first instinct was also to go there and be like, fuck. And to know that that was their first instinct, was to go to our little island and be like, there are other people who are going through this right now. To be a place where people can have shared experiences is what I think every co-working space aspires to. And when we're thinking about online spaces, I think that's more what it looks like. It's like, what are the things that people experience throughout their days, whether it's work or life or all of the above, because those things are not demarcated the way that we like to believe that they are. And what are the places that people think to go when they're feeling a certain way? And which place do you want to be? And what feelings do you want to be associated with, or what you choose? And that to me is one of the most important things to try and understand about who your community really is now, and how, when do they show up, right? Do they show up when there's an event, when there's free beer, when there's when there's a talk to watch, or do they show up when something is happening and they feel like they need to connect? And if you're seeing less of the latter, then I think that suggests a change in where you're putting your energy.
And I think to put this also, because we've been mapping out so many things visually, creating safe havens and those small islands that in digital can be a safe harbor for people, wandering around in a small kayak, not knowing, where to look for. If we all can contribute to providing that by taking a step back and looking at the safety of our members first, and putting ourselves out of the equation, might also be one of the takeaways that I would like to leave people with from this chat. Thank you so much, Alex, for giving your precious time, the insight and the knowledge, and being so real about sharing the challenges and how you overcome those. I think there is a lot to be said for the future, but I'm hoping that at least what we have provided for the people watching and the people who will be rewatching the conference in the days to come, in the months to come, is that thinking outside the box with a bird's eye view can at times be most beneficial for the members of your community. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're always welcome. Looking forward to 2021 and maybe doing these things in person. It would be a pleasure.
I love that.
It would be a pleasure. We are sending all the love here from the studio, from Symphony. Thank you so much. And thanks once again for sharing. If you have time, keep up with the rest of the conference. We'll be excited to have you in the comments.
I'll be in the chat.
Perfect. All the best.
Cool. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much, everything, for keeping up with Alex Hillman and us here at the CCCSEE digital event. We are now moving to a session that is really important for us, and because there is always an emotional story to be told and a tribute to be given. This year is no different. And I would actually invite here with me, Misha, Miroslav Miatov.
Hello.
Unknown to many as Miroslav Miatov, but known to many as Misha. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to leave the floor to you. This is the part where I actually had to do nothing except watch you and enjoy the video afterwards.
Just to tell that even my closest friends when I was younger didn't know my real name, so most of the people know me as Misha, so it's totally okay.
It's a name. It's a name that people love you with. It doesn't really matter. The association is a good one.
Yeah.
Misha, take the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say a big thanks to all the people who supported this conference. This symphony company, they are a great host and they put a lot of effort in hosting us here. And then European Co-working Assembly, definitely, because they are our partners in crime. And of course, being a partner for the European Freelancers Week means a lot to us, and we are supporting that movement from the start. And of course, sometimes I feel like Forrest Gump, and in the times when I try to do something, all of you say to me, run Miroslav, run, or run Misha, run, and then I start running. So that's how this conference actually is happening right now. Of course, I would like to say a big thanks to my team, and especially Uroš, who is putting up with me with the second year in a row. And he's always my rational voice, what to do, what not to do, and in moments when I'm a bit nervous and when something doesn't go according to my plan, I have to say my plan, then he's that voice over my shoulder who is saying that everything will be okay and to calm me down a little bit. So a big thanks to you and to the rest of the team. So the next panel is about co-living and
No. Tribute video.
But after the tribute video is a co-living panel.
Okay.
And it's very hard to talk about co-living if we don't mention some people. So we had a plan last year to invite one of the most important persons when we are talking about co-living and that movement. And we got the confirmation even before the New Year's Eve. And that guest was supposed to be Stuart Jones, who was the founder of Coworkation. And he was so happy to be in Croatia. Well, he had some other plans to go to Croatia, but then he said, okay, then there's a conference, I will be there, definitely. And when we spoke the last time in June, he was very pumped about it, and he said, oh, yeah, I'm coming to Rovinj, and then I will go to other island. And at the end of June, I just got the message that he passed away. So that was a terrible loss, especially for his family, and then for the rest of us who knew him. So he changed many lives in so many different ways. He was the person who understood life. He understood the future of living, future of working, and he lived that to the fullest. And his area of expertise was life designing. And when I was in Barcelona at his camp in Coworkation, he was explaining to us what really is life designing. So the next video is dedicated to him.
The emotional part kicks in.
Yeah, always, every time.
Yeah.
So
that's the beauty of this.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So he will be greatly missed, and
so co-workation, they're 1 to 2 week trips to exotic places around the world, and in these locations the workspaces are moving. So We'll work from the villa or the accommodation, where there's obviously going to be a lovely swimming pool that we'll have next to us. But then we'll be going off and seeing other beautiful places around that location or that destination where we're at, and we'll convert them into workspaces. And we'll do a series of programming that is all about working on your business as opposed to in your business. So taking a back step from your normal day-to-day environment, trying to look at your bigger picture issues of your business or your career, your vision, your strategy, your planning, then addressing topics such as lifestyle design, and then also some of the more psychological and cognitive elements of self-development for professional growth. You know, the past 15 years or so I've been managing my business whilst travelling at the same time. And so a few years ago when I discovered co-working spaces, instinctively popped into my mind of, well, bringing co-working spaces whilst travelling. So the idea of co-workation sprung up. The location independent movement, and I really do see it as a movement, is just at the cusp. Every month there's more and more people becoming aware that there's other ways of living and working. The program's designed to curate frames of mind that enable us to come up with new ideas and become more creative. The old-fashioned management school of thought taught us that working from an office was essential, but being stuck in a cubicle stifles motivation and productivity. It doesn't have to be this way. Okay, that's right, one more time. Co-workation was born as a culmination of that experience and knowledge. We got it? Come hang out with me because I'm cool. Please?
And we're back to our regular programming. You know how I said at the very beginning we had people who went above and beyond, and then even some of them with their ideas went outside of the lines that we have put, but then created amazing content. It's exactly what Cutwork has done for us and for this conference, and we are very thankful to have them the second year in a row bless us with what they have been innovatively doing in the past year. More importantly, we have Antonin, who is the chief architect and the co-founder of the studio, is going to take us on a story that for a lot of people is unknown. How co-living, design, and architecture can be influenced by nature and bird watching, and sustainability is a beautiful story of how passionate people coming together can create space for new communities to flourish and grow. We're going to video right now, a special video presentation made by Cutwork, and we're going to have Antonin tune in after that for a brief Q&A before we go to the co-living panel. So stay tuned, enjoy the next video, and be back for a live Q&A with Antonin.
goods, services, and property have changed, especially in the last decade. And we're seeing access replacing ownership as a priority for many consumers. In fact, as of 2016, only 4% of people were unwilling to share anything at all, giving rise to the shared economy, which is allowing for a more sustainable distribution of costs, resources, businesses, and services. So probably the main takeaway I wanna have here is that architecture and design will be unmistakably affected by these social, demographic, and economic changes, and that it's time to rethink and adapt architecture and design to the ways people are actually living, working, and in many cases sharing today.
As a studio, so we design architecture, buildings, interior, and furniture to support these shifts. But to start, really, I believe that cities should be built by people who understand how to activate biodiversity. Our collective relationship with nature is at the core of this. So to us, it's really important to deeply consider and understand what this relationship is in order to reinvent it, like from the ground up. Architecture is not just about stacking floors on top of each other and closing the box with like a fancy facade. It's about what happens between the people that live and work with it. But even beyond that, this is just not only about the people, the humans. When we say together has changed, together is not just about the humans to humans relationship. It's also about opening our senses to the immediate environments and the greater territories that we share with a lot of different kinds of lives. For example, in the city, even without the urban activities, the urban sound, the rumble of our human activities, the environment is not quiet at all. Birds just sing. In fact, they do a lot of things. They trill, they babble, they chatter, they cry, they croak, they whistle, they root. So even without us, the environment, some things are happening without us. And the big question is, how can we make the city an environment that is about the blossoming and the natural proliferation of life? How can our building be thought for the multitude of species and motion that are living with us? For us, we'd like to think that building could be planted like trees to activate biodiversity in our cities. They should really actively give back more to our ecosystem than what they take out in spaces and resources. Before we go into some example, let's take a look at the way people are actually really defining and relating to nature today.
Our senses are getting dimmed, and our attention is relentlessly getting pulled in countless different directions all the time. Just as an example, in the early 2000s, the average time a human could concentrate was 12 seconds. And today, in the flood of the information age, this has dropped to 8 seconds. Just for perspective, the average attention span of a goldfish is 9. So this is a pretty radical shift that we're witnessing right now. And not only is our attention span shrinking, but the direction is also changing in content. Almost anyone will instinctively recognize a brand logo, even when far away or in small print at the bottom of a poster. And an American study in 2014 showed that North American children from the age of 4 to 10 could recognize and distinguish thousands of brands instantly at just a first glance. Yet, they were unable to identify the leaves of 10 plants in their local environment.
So, our lifestyle have become increasingly urban, and with it there's a crisis of attention towards non-human living beings. And in fact, the very mechanism of our perception has completely changed. Our most fundamental sensitivity to recognize patterns and shapes in our environment has shifted toward manufacturing goods, in fact. And this replacement is really just accelerating with the monetized economy of attention that is becoming bigger and bigger these days. More and more, we are losing touch with the diversity of species we share and inhabit our spaces with. And today, globally, 55% of people now live in urban areas. And in most Western countries, this is even higher. Like, for example, in France, it's 61%. In fact, in North America, by the turn of the century, people spent 87% of their time indoors already. And today, kids only spend an average of 4 to 7 minutes outdoors per day, like 4 to 7 minutes. And also, they are spending 7.5 hours on screens per day. So this is quite impressive, I feel, as a number, but these figures were before confinement. Can you imagine how this must have increased today? So to give you an idea, in fact, in Australia, the national broadband network saw that daytime screen increased over 70% from February to March. So for us, all of this shows that our collective imagination and experience of wild nature is completely framed. Basically, we are forgetting nature, and let alone the idea of wilderness. I think personally that this perspective has been fueled by two conceptual fundamental mistakes. We oppose natural to artificial. And also what we do is we misdefine somehow what is natural with what is original. In truth, today relatively few hectares of virgin Amazonian forest remain in their original, somehow untouched states. And with mankind's impact on the global composition of the atmosphere, even this conception of untouched can be really easily challenged. So when we oppose natural to artificial, and when we misdefine natural with original, does this mean that today our world is no longer natural anymore?
We've completely forgotten a simpler, more elegant truth here. As humans, we arose and evolved from the same molecular processes and physics that govern anything else in the universe. We're a part of nature by default, and thus so are all of our activities. Yes, technology, AI, video games, cars, the internet, these can all be considered branches of nature in this respect. And yes, even human-made climate change should be considered a force of nature. So in this lies the key issue, though. Our entire conception of nature is now tinted by human activity. It's distorted by our own degrees of involvement and accountability. And we somehow have grown into a very transactional relationship with nature, yet we fail to understand it as a limited resource. So we need to very quickly become aware of these constraints and to rethink our personal and collective relationships with nature.
Somehow we could see that differently, I think. Perhaps our conception of nature could be replaced by a new conception of living beings in order to reframe our perspectives and renew a sensitive and practical relationship with the multiplicity of the life forms and their needs. I think we need to embrace the fact that we are a part of a bigger system of lives, a vast, very vast ensemble of milieux in which we coexist. Rather than just taking care of nature, perhaps we should be asking, how can we work more closely with it? How might our actions impact or disrupt processes beyond our immediate awareness? Even in a less abstract way, particularly as architects, designers, and developers, we can really zero in to ask, how can we build habitats that invite people to open and expand their relationship with nature? How can we bring nature back into the foreground just by design? Okay, so now I would love to share with you some projects that are really pioneering these ideas in what I think are incredible ways. So the first example I'd like to show you is very literally a project of a living architecture. These are living bridges in Meghalaya in India. The Khasi is a tribe that carefully leads vines and aerial roots of rubber fig trees to stretch across rivers and streams. And the bridge can take around like 10 to 15 years to grow. Once a few first roots can like strand on the other side, it becomes easy to kind of draw along others and gradually grow the structure into something that can support up to 50 people at the time. This vernacular technique has existed and worked for generations, and it's a very simple response to a local circumstance. This is one of the most humid regions in the world, and basically if you'd built a bridge with just wood, with just industrialized wood, it would rot. So this is a solution that is really thought within and integrated within the constraint of its environment. But also, what I find very interesting about this type of construction is that basically the older people of the tribe give a route, give the responsibility of a route and a direction towards somewhere to a younger one. And basically they tell them, okay, look, I took that route from there, and now I'm giving it to you, and you're taking it from there. So for me, this is very interesting how this living architecture is both a structure integrated with the social system of the tribe, but also the living system of the environment. It's a whole new form somehow of regenerative architecture, a structure that only goes stronger and stronger thanks to the fact that it's alive. Meanwhile, more industrial materials as we know it today, like concrete or steel, only grow kind of weaker and weaker all the time. Living architecture, in that sense, is one of the most promising horizons to shift like Western perspective and to open our perspective on a different understanding of nature. The next thing I'd like to show you guys is a project by Baubotanic, which is led by Ferdinand Ludwig, who is a researcher. And this is another hybrid form of living architecture. So in fact, Ludwig has been really inspired by the living bridges of Meghalaya. And the main idea is to use a steel construction metal frame around which living trees can really grow and behave as part of the structure of the live architecture, really blurring the lines between man-made and nature even kind of further. So somehow this is a cross-species collaboration. This is between industrial and between living architecture, and that makes it extremely interesting to me. And just think about it. These are just, you'll have these trees, and the platform grows with the trees. So basically, this construction is growing literally. As time goes by, these trees fuse into a single organism blended from the trunk of the trees and the metallic structures. This is an exceptional example of a structure that basically only gives back to the ecosystem, as opposed to building that always is trading or takes something out even when they are like carbon neutral. So I think, in fact, this type of building shifts completely our trading relationship with the environment. Today, we're just beginning to see nature intervene at that type of scale, also at the urban scale, but even at way larger scale. Like, for example, Panda Studio designed the farmhouse that is actually under construction. We have a very famous Bosco Verticale from Stefano Boeri in Milan. There's also the urban forest by Koichi Takada coming out of Brisbane in Australia. And these are all towers that act as a big vertical forest, basically. And we believe that if enough architects and urban developers begin to understand how their building can interact with the ecosystem kind of beyond the footprint of the structure, we can help reframe our collective relationship back to nature. And in terms of sustainable urban development, this is perhaps one of the single biggest challenge. Can you just imagine if a full city were built like this, with just buildings that are like big trees basically, and the city is thought as a very large environment that is not a forest, not a city, but something kind of in between. So beyond space and urban design, I feel there is another scale in this game, the personal perspective scale. And so earlier this year, I've made a downloadable PDF introduction guide to urban bird watching. So we call that window birds. And I really wanted to make that as an invitation to reopen our senses in city habitats towards non-human living beings. This features 55 birds that you can see just looking from your window. These are very easy birds to spot, basically. And the idea is that if we can refocus our attention and open new relationships towards living beings, this can gradually reshape our whole relationship with nature. And for me, since I'm a child, this just happened through birds. But anyone can, of course, find their own path in nature. There's a lot of ways to connect with it. But for me, it's birds. And so I would love to take a few minutes right now just to introduce you to some common birds that you may not have noticed, but that we are sharing our habitat with, that inhabit the city also just like us. So the first bird is really one of my favorite. It's called a long-tailed orite. And this is a little bird that ranks amongst the best builders in the kingdom of birds. So basically, I relate to this bird a lot. And despite the fact that it's a very small bird by size, its nest is proportionally very, very big. It's reaching on average like 20 by 12 centimeters. It's a pretty big thing when the bird is really, really tiny. It will carefully camouflage the surface of the nest with the kind of scraps of barks and cobwebs and cocoons of insects, just to really remain very camouflaged and hidden, which is really interesting to take care so much of the facade somehow. And this makes them a little maybe harder spot, but you can see them in trees and flying around bushes, hedges, and shrubs. And they also go like very socially. And so you see them as a group. And in fact, they really understood the power of group collaboration. And its social manners, its habits, allows them, in fact, to survive in winter. So basically, you'll see sometimes a lot of them, like 7, just aligned like this, like little bolts, that huddle together along a branch, and they're ruffling their plumage, and basically they work together closely to just lose as little heat as possible. So you see this bird basically understanding the power of collaboration and being a super good builder. I don't know, I had to like that bird for sure somewhere. Some of you may be already familiar with this one. This is the common swift. It's kind of very easy to recognize. It has a very crescent shape, and you can spot them in the summer evenings when they travel back to their roosts for the night. What's interesting about these birds is that their physiology is completely sculpted and made towards flying. So they can really, really like fly for a long time. They fly around 600 kilometers per day. Theoretically, they can remain in continuous flight from August of one year to April the next year. To say this is from one breeding time to another, which is completely phenomenal. And this bird somehow, as you can think about, it can sleep in flight without having to land. It is thought that they must sleep while coasting on the ascending drafts. We're not really sure about that, but that's kind of what we think there. Okay, and the last one is called the Eurasian nuthatch. And this is a very active and agile bird that can be seen doing acrobatics, really crazy things in the city trees. This has very robust legs. It has a very large 4-strong toe with very sharp curved talons, and it allows it to grip on the smoothest even barks of trees. And because of that, they are able to really climb in every direction. So not like the creeper, they can really go down, which is their very distinctive thing. This is one of the only birds that can do that. Okay, I think I could really go a whole talk about birds and show you a lot of them, but let's just zoom back out somehow. So this whole relationship I have with birds has definitely influenced how I design and think about buildings. So here is a project that we call Bird Wall. Basically, the idea is to have the metallic structure being able to support planters, and then to select from there certain species of plants that are really suitable for this specific local area, and to make sure this is attracting the right insect to support somehow the birds. And the other thing that we do here is we have a module here that you can plug in and hook to this metallic structure that are bird houses and insect hotels. and basically we make them for the specific species there, and that will help really activate the biodiversity. The whole idea here is to use the existing city as a place to transform it into an ecosystem, and just turn these blind facades or existing building facades into really like living gardens, vertical living gardens. The next thing I'd like to show you guys is one of our research projects that we called the cohabitation unit. And so the cohabitation unit is really asking itself right now, what is today's appropriate basic urban block that will make today's city? In short, the cohabitation unit combines a variety of different usages unified into a single block. This is more than just a traditional apartment block. For instance, you have an open ground cafe, a co-working space, a public roof plaza, and a community garden that allows it to be very porous to the urban environment. And in that logic of porosity to the others, basically, we have also a very strong idea here, that is the living facade, in which we have these double height shared balconies that are made for the resident to interact and use together. Like they can like have a drink together, play chess, just talk, relax, read a book. But also, this is very well designed for vegetation growth, and so basically to activate the biodiversity through that facade and also the rooftop. We'll leave you with a few closing thoughts here. What if we recognize that such boundaries of differences are artificial, kind of fictions of our own making? The fiction of nature is one of the big contemporary narratives subdividing our togetherness, and it's really constricting our collaborative potential, and we have to confront it now. A more inclusive perspective of nature could even lead to a more inclusive understanding of each other.
Reinventing our relationship to nature means reinventing our relationships in a much wider sense, between one another, between men and women, between people who are just starting out, people who retired, people of all ages. It means for us to recognize that we are a part of something much bigger than just ourselves.
If we recognize that we are a part of nature, then this becomes very inclusive, and we are animals, we are humans, we are conscious, we are alive, and we share that. Suddenly we're really together.
In today, we're beginning to see how this can even extend as far as between humans and machines, between people and engineered forms of life. So within this bigger inclusive definition of nature, we're already seeing new kinds of differences emerge. You know, we're not yet robots, we're not yet genetically enhanced, and we're not engineered in labs, but these differences are coming. So the big question is, how inclusive are we going to be on these fronts?
And we're back live in the studio, and I'm very happy to have Antonin with us here today from Cutwork. You've heard the amazing story that about how the nature and bird watching has influenced his design and philosophy and approach to the projects that he does with his team at Cutwork. But I would like to use this opportunity, first of all, to thank you for tuning in and then actually taking time, if I'm not mistaken, from bird watching, what you're actually doing in Bretagne right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Precisely.
Okay. So, welcome. I'm so sad that we're not together like we were last year in person, but I guess this is the next best to do. What I'm actually happy for is that we're going to leave the conference ongoing for it's going to stay online forever. So in those terms, I would be happy if we can sort of touch upon two things that we briefly discussed. First of all, can you tell us a bit more, sort of when did you start bird watching, and when did this fascination with nature sort of came into play for you, and how that influences your design? Is that something that happens organically, or is it something that you sort of had to attune to?
Well, it's quite Yeah, for me, I started watching birds around at 8, something like that, since I'm very young, and I have a whole group of friends with whom I do that. So it's pretty intertwined somehow with my personality, with my identity. It's kind of everywhere, always with me, everyday lifestyle somehow. And I think, yeah, somewhere it goes hand by hand with me. It's like I don't know, I never get bored, you know. I'm in the nature and I look at a lot of birds, and because I'm an architect in the city, I never get bored because I look at buildings and urbanism, all of that interests me a lot. And somehow, yeah, what I think is that what links both these things is an approach to the surrounding. It's a way to be open in your mindset to the surrounding that is around us. It's an approach to the territory, to the space somehow that is very, very different from not just knowing that there are birds and there are animals around.
Well, that's you know, when we were discussing this, I was thinking about what are all the time, and it actually comes from a conversation that I had with Kelsey last year. She was about I'm always looking to find what the added value in a panel is, and then this year when I was thinking about what are the messages that we can take within the concept of what now, how do you think nature is different to the habitats that we are part of or the society that we're in, and what can we learn from nature in a way that maybe influences the things that we do in the future in a more organic way, or just in a way that is more attuned with who we are as human beings? I think we have a frozen picture. I'm not sure if it's our internet or not.
I think Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I cannot really see
you. Can
you.
you hear me, guys? Hello? You cannot see me? What a pity.
Yeah, I'm seeing a frozen picture of you. You look good on the photo. That I can tell you.
Okay, but I'll say, yeah. So I think what we can learn some.
And now
okay, but if you can hear me, that's fine, I think. So
okay.
I think when you look at nature, when you hang around in nature and you look at birds and animals, I think what is very striking here is that it's aware that they are not really blind to the fact that they don't think they are the only species sharing the environment. They don't think like us, like humans. We believe that we are just the only ones alive around, and that we are the only ones using the environment somehow. But no one in nature, no other form of living beings thinks that. They're always making sounds, moving in a certain way that is relative to others, that has always something to do with, they have in mind that other species exist around them and that actually they are sharing the space with them. And that is key. I think that's what we need to kind of learn from them. In order to really rethink our definition of nature and to stop having this transactional relationship to nature, to stop thinking that we need to trade with nature. Yeah, something like that. I think that's the biggest lesson that nature can give us. We are not alone, us humans alive, and then there's a whole bunch of other species that we call nature. We put them in a nature box and we just drop them inside and they're away from us. Actually, we share the environment with a lot of different types of alive things, of alive beings. So we need to integrate that within our thinking. And I think once we do this, we'll design architecture and cities very differently.
And that's maybe something that we can also use for community building, that the communities that we are a part of are not exclusive one to another, but are interacting, and we're always interacting. So if there is one thing that we can take away from nature is probably that interacting in sync with everything that is around us and being aware of everything that happens around us is probably a way to go forward. And I think what COVID has sort of allowed us as a lens is to understand that without each other, there is not much else that we can do, because alone it's not going forward. It's, you know, staying captured in a moment, not in a good way, being static.
And I think you're really right. This is really a discussion about inclusivity or exclusivity. Like, how inclusive are we going to be in what we call nature, that has historically been something away, a foe, something that we fight, that we protect ourselves from. But if we get inclusive to that, like everything changes somehow. Like really everything, the perspective on nature, the definition of nature, and hence the definition of ourselves changed completely. And I think that's what is really interesting. And if we push that idea further, I think with the rise of AI and artificial intelligence and robots and somehow new types of engineered lives, we will have to ask ourselves this kind of same question for these boundaries about what is alive here and what is natural, what is nature here.
Maybe we can sort of provide a lot more nature, giving it to the digital and to the robotics, because I mean, the machines are what you feed them, right? The same as with software and AI. So if we feed them more of this organic cohabitation that is balanced and systematic, maybe even the future will become more of that. Thank you, Antonin, so much for tuning in. We have another panel that beautifully clicks into what you guys have been doing, and Kelsey is on it. So I'm going to say goodbye to you for now. Thank you so much for dedicating your time watching us instead of birds for this period. Enjoy the rest of your trip. Say hi to your friends, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next year in person.
Pleasure.
All the best.
Bye.
Have a great time. Bye. And we're back. We'll be tuning in into the co-living panel in 30 seconds. I just wanted to say thank you to Antonin for doing this. I'm going to start the Zoom session now. This is pretty much the only panel that we're going to do fully remotely, as the digital conference would allow. So I'm very happy to have Kelsey, Kate, and Matt joining us in from 3 different cities and 3 different time zones. I'll start the meeting right now. Give me a second. Kate is here. Hi, Kate. So good to have you. We are waiting for others to join. Kelsey has tuned in as well. Perfect. We're just waiting for Matt to tune in. Hi, Kelsey.
Hello.
Good to have you.
Hi, Rose. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Look at us, all wearing black or navy, being super professional, unlike the last Zoom call.
You're being fashionable. We're being fashionable.
Wait, let's see if Matt breaks it or if he follows suit.
Let's see if he keeps up, mainly.
black.
Okay, looks like he's doing all right. He's doing all right.
He's a little more natural than we are.
Hi, Matt. So good to have you. Okay, guys, first of all, I apologize for a bit of delay, but some of the discussions have taken a bit longer than we anticipated just because they were so good, and I'm super grateful for all of you guys to dedicate a time to do this with us today. We are ending on a high note, and the co-living has sort of been, the other part of the equation. We always talk about co-working, and then co-living comes second, but the reason why we left it for last is because we thought that specifically this year, the topic of co-living within the new post-COVID or during COVID lens is something that we should explore more. I would invite all 3 of you to briefly introduce yourselves, tell us what you guys are doing, and then we can sort of take it from there to answer the question that Misha has asked us all, and that is what now? Matt, should we let the ladies have the honors?
Of course.
Kate?
I'm going to let Kate go first because she's the queen.
Oh, God. Thank you. So I'm Kate. I'm based in London. I run a co-living that is called Startup Home. I'm the mayor of London for Startup Home. Our co-living is focused on entrepreneurs, startups, remote workers, and freelancers. I'm also the lead ambassador, but also the UK ambassador for Co-Live. Co-Live is the global co-living association. We are a non-profit, and we're not just an association, but we are also an ecosystem, a do tank, And our ethos is to really empower, connect, and educate the co-living world. And the co-living movement, actually, I would like to say.
You've got the pitch nailed down, Kate. Beautiful.
The Queen. Kelsey said it right.
Yes.
Kelsey,
For
take the
sure.
floor.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody that's out there. I guess those tuning in have already heard quite a bit about cut work and about myself. I already did a short introduction, but for those who didn't see the video before or who were just tuning in, my name is Kelsey Crawford. I'm the co-founder of Cut Work, which is an architecture and design studio. What we like to say is specialized in new ways to live and work. We're really interested in projects that are redefining habitat space and particular shared space as the way that we live and the way that we work is radically changing. And I think COVID has just been an accelerator of many trends that were happening before. But it's really this movement, co-living being one iteration of how we're learning to share space differently, habitate the earth differently, is really the core focus of our practice. And we developed a co-living project in France called Flatmates. That was a 600-bed co-living project that opened last summer. We are currently designing a co-living brand for a French actor who's got a very nice amount of residencies in the pipeline. We're working on a co-living project in St. Petersburg, Russia, 400 plus bed project, a project in Dubai as well. So we're really beginning to see a lot of international co-living happening as well, but we've really got a deep understanding of the French and European market in particular. So I think that's what I'm going to share with you guys today is some insights that I've had over the last 6 months with projects and clients and the market in general. And then finally, like Kate mentioned, I'm very actively involved in CoLive as well. I'm the ambassador of the French chapter of CoLive. So I help run the French meetups and host our community and help build up and really mature and empower the co-living scene in France. So I'll also be able to maybe shed some light from the meetups going on in the last year. So, and thank you so much for having us. It was a big loss. I don't see the kimono suit like you promised me.
I have the kimono pants.
Okay. But we really are excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us and look forward to the talk.
Awesome. Matt, take the floor.
Yeah, I don't know what to say after those beautiful introductions. So, but my name is Matt Lesniak, and I'm the head of impact and innovation at a co-living consultancy called Conscious Co-Living. And we are a spatial and experience design consultancy that focuses on embedding well-being, community, and sustainability into co-living projects. And I'm also the co-founder of an organization called Co-Living Insights, which is a media platform and a research lab for the co-living sector. And we've published a few editions in the last year. One was on the state of COVID-19 and the state of the co-living sector amidst this health and economic crises. So I can talk a little bit about that during our panel. And the most recent one was around impact and sustainability in co-living, which I really see as the future of co-living and where this sector needs to go. On top of that, I'm also part of CoLive. I'm the head of community at CoLive, helping with the whole membership part of the CoLive organization. And I was also part of the leading team back in 2016 when it was called Pure House Lab. So it's now turned into CoLive, but I've been involved with CoLive for the last few years. And similarly to Kate and Kelsey, really believe in the potential of co-living. And via these different platforms, I'm really just trying to help promote and fulfill the potential of co-living.
I think there is one of the beautiful things that I take away from the entire day today is that COVID has been an accelerator, a shift in perspective, a challenge, but we never really talk about it in a negative way, which I find to be super inspiring. So, especially for co-living, and in our brief discussion before the panel, we touched upon a fact that it was never more important to talk about co-living and to understand how sharing space for people and having your own space to yourself as well might be not only the new normal, but the new future for the way that our cities are going to look like in the years to come. So how do you see the acceleration or the shift in how things are perceived, and what has been your experience for the past, let's say, 6 months in terms of how things are perceived, what clients are looking at, what the members of the community are facing? How do you what's the changing landscape? Let's put it this way. Let's try to paint a picture of that.
Can I take the floor here?
The Queen, of course.
Can I start? Yeah. So I also live in our co-living space. So I'm gonna talk about the point of view from someone who actually lived in a co-living space during the whole COVID. I think that so it's 12 of us at the moment in Startup Home in Islington, in London, and it actually being together during those really tough months, because they've been quite difficult for everybody, has been like a lifesaver, to be honest, because we were able to still do a lot of things to, let's say, hang out together, even if we weren't allowed to leave the property itself. We have a fantastic rooftop, a massive big space outside, so we had all our events in there anyway, anything from fitness activity to barbecues to evenings with music and party, let's say, as much as possible. And the support that we gave each other, because obviously we all come from a background which is very similar in entrepreneurship or freelancer or remote working, has been really priceless. None of us has felt lonely on their own, lost, but we really felt that we belong together. And the fact that we were there together has helped us so much to support each other. On a more, let's say, business point of view or developing point of view, actually, we've seen within our household 2 new startups starting because of COVID and because of the time that people had more. You got less time to go outside and socialize, so you have more time to concentrate on your projects, and also collaboration within everybody that lived there in any possible way, which could be on a working side or also on a personal side. And I think this has been, in a sort of way, will become a bit of a blueprint moving forward.
Kelsey, what has been your experience based in Paris and working on projects and sort of navigating the whole spectrum with the team at Cutwork, but also with clients and the people that you're in touch with through CoLive?
Ooh, okay. Well, I can give 3 kind of directions to this response. First, I agree completely with Kate. The feedback that I had from clients of ours about co-living members in their sites, whether it was in Spain, whether it was in France, whether it was in the US, is that above and all, people who lived in co-living fared better during confinement than people who were isolated in very small or just isolated in general in apartments by themselves. And we heard so many stories of solidarity, of co-living members doing grocery shopping for one another when someone was sick. It was just really heartwarming to see that and to really hear direct feedback. From the perspective of our company, well, we went straight into remote work pretty much from the end of February, beginning of March. And thankfully, we're a team of a lot of remote workers in general, and Slack is kind of our office now, more so than any physical office. So the transition for us was okay. And actually, with all of the tools available for design and architecture today digitally, it's possible to collaborate at a distance. And we even were able to deliver a full concept of a new co-living brand for a client in June, all of which the work was done at a distance, remote during COVID. So that was pretty exciting also, just in terms of our team. And then as far as projects are going, what I've noticed and what I've experienced is that projects that were already rolling before COVID, full steam ahead. We didn't have any projects pull out. co-living projects in development. However, projects that were still waiting to sign the ink and get going or waiting for funding, everything has been pretty frozen up. We've got timelines that are like push forward 6 months, 8 months, 12 months for many projects that I had assumed would have started before the end of the year. I think in general, investments are difficult at this moment because there's so much uncertainty in the market and investors are less willing to pull the trigger straight away. However, quite paradoxically, to what many people might think, the interest in co-living has only swelled during COVID. And I've had feedback from institutional investors, from private investors, from public investors with dedicated funds in co-living who have told me they've never received more requests or more portfolios sent for assets to develop in the co-living sector. Never worked harder in their lives to move a particular asset class. So I think as I mentioned before, the trend of shared living is only accelerating because of COVID. And I think we also see it as a very resilient investment, compared to other types of residential, compared to hotel, and especially looking at co-living as a hybrid model moving forward, where we have a diversity of short stay, mid stay, long stay, to really help navigate crises like the one that we're living through. So I'm optimistic for co-living as a sector. I think it's really just bursting open the doors of a new type of living together, which, you know, isn't new because of COVID. It's always been there. It's just now people are paying a lot more attention to this style of living.
Maybe it has opened up to an entire new class of people who never really considered that that's an option, just because, like, all of us are now remote, right? So a lot of people who sort of worked like a regular office hours are now working remotely, and it's just a work from home has become like the predominant hashtag for companies that never considered that. Moving out of the big cities or moving to other cities has sort of given a perspective of where are all these people going to live and work together. And is co-living the answer to that? I'm going to leave the floor to Matt with this, and obviously to comment on our previous topic, but I just this inspired me, what you just said for this. There is an army of people looking for a place to live and reconsider the living habitat. Maybe co-living is the answer. What do you think, Matt?
So I can only sort of respond to some of the things or bounce back on some of the things that Kelsey and Kate already shared. Co-living is this alternative asset class, which is already gathering a lot of interest from institutional real estate investors and professionals and other types of professionals. And there were really like 3 or 4 main qualities or characteristics of co-living that are now even accelerating even more. And for me, it's affordability, it's convenience, community, and sustainability and well-being as well. And those elements are really what attract people towards a type of asset class like co-living. And COVID-19 has only accelerated all of those things. So during COVID and even now, one thing that's very attractive to residents living in co-living is this sense of like these amenities, these services, in-house co-working, and just having on-site management or direct feedback loops and communication with management and on-site staff. And that's provided like a really real sense of safety and security for a lot of residents, which some people did not experience at all living through COVID in maybe more isolated single room studios in quite big dense cities. So the acceleration of loneliness and social isolation has also occurred in the last few months. And like Kate mentioned and Kelsey mentioned, living in a space like co-living, what was a awesome solution for that, or just response to that. So luckily for Kate and a lot of these other co-livers in the last 9 months, I have also heard really, really beautiful stories that Kelsey shared as well of all these kinds of support systems and just strong like social capital, what I call social capital. So yeah, your question is like, is co-living going to be the sort of future asset class? I'm not quite sure. I think it's still an emerging sector. It's still quite a small sector in regards to the residential sector. But one thing that's positive for co-living is that housing, there will always be a demand for housing. And those different characteristics that I mentioned make it a super attractive housing option, and it's more attractive or resilient compared to other single family or multifamily or built to rent or service apartments, and even hospitality, which we've seen get quite crushed over the last few months. And co-live is this good kind of like Goldilocks zone between all of those things, where yeah, you're able to get short to medium to long-term stays. You're able to get this access to convenience, access to experience, access to community, and similarly to what you would have in hospitality, but with less of the transience that you get from hospitality as well. So that's really what has sort of grounded co-living over the last few months, which is quite positive for all of us that are interested in the sector. And yeah, I think there's, like Kelsey mentioned, there's more and more interest. Just a few months ago, right in the middle of COVID, was the launch of a $1 billion fund in Paris from Bauinvest, Greystar, and Ivanhoe Cambridge. So big real estate firms and asset managers, creating this $1 billion or €1 billion fund in Paris just for co-living sites. And that wasn't the first one. There was already one in 2018 from Co-Estate, and there have been a few other ones dedicated just to co-living, such as DTZ in London, which is a partner of the collective. So these sort of like specific funds just for co-living show that there's an immense attractiveness and demand for co-living, and people are really looking towards it to be this sustainable housing alternative. But yeah, it still represents, though, like a small percentage of overall housing stock and overall kind of residential real estate assets. But even that small percentage is quite a big kind of stock, or quite a big percentage of resi options. So.
Where do you guys sort of see, do you see that there is going to be transition, because the digital nomads and sort of being the freedom to travel from one place to another has been severely hindered, and we have no idea when the things are going to open up in a way or if they're ever going to open up in the way they were before. But do you think that co-living spaces that were sort of oriented towards digital nomads can now sort of open up to local residents who are looking for spaces such as co-living, because the nature of the work they do has changed, all of them becoming remote and things and such? Do you think there is a potential for that? For anyone?
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, I'll take the microphone. I think it already has been, and there's different types of co-living already. There's different typologies. These different typologies vary based on length of stay, based on location, based on different types of demographics, or what some co-living operators like to call psychographics as well, which is more of a state of mind. And these different typologies already exist even before COVID, and the two kind of bigger ones that you see are these urban, more longer-term residential type of co-living spaces, and then these more destinational kind of remote workation type of locations that you'll find in more rural areas, for example. So I think the destinational type of co-living got hit a bit hard in the last few months, especially in countries like Spain, where hospitality was totally closed off and sort of like put on a temporary ban. But these residential offers that are a bit more long stay have proven to be quite resilient, with like dips in occupancy that are quite minimal, between 5 to 15 to 20%, which is not big enough to really make them crash, and small enough to help them float and keep going. So I think like it's also the trends of the demographics themselves, so like the digital nomads, that will change. So digital nomads will sort of become a term I heard a few times over the last few months, digital slow mads. So it's also about like slowing down the pace of travel, thinking about more sustainable travel, and really embedding into local neighborhoods and economies for longer periods of time. And instead of maybe staying a week in some place, to stay a month to 3 to 6 months. So I think it's also the kind of trends and the mentalities of the demographics that will change, and then co-living spaces will evolve with those sort of changing mindsets.
Yeah, I think that the changes that we might be seeing heavily in the next year, at least, until, like you said before, the whole world will reopen and people will feel not just more free to travel, but also safer to travel. We will see a lot of what we call home digital nomads. So people that live in the same country, but they can work remotely. I've seen a lot of, my close acquaintances, but also people in countries I'm connected to the most, which is obviously Italy and the UK and Spain as well, deciding to actually move in within their countries. So being a digital nomad, more a home digital nomad, if that makes sense. And that's really nice because it will open up possibilities for more places, like Matt was saying, to get to know different people. And it will actually push this sort of culture of, in a sort of way, like a house as a service or a place as a service, instead of being just placed in one place, having really the possibility to move around, even if it's not in another country, and be able to work or experience something else from somewhere. And we will see a shift from my point of view. That's what I see. We will see a shift of cities and countryside, kind of like constantly moving around, which I think it's going to be beautiful. And there is an observation, if you don't mind me saying, in the chat that I can see that Alex did. And he was just saying how actually, living in isolation and living on our own in small private spaces, flats and stuff like that, is actually something that has been happening more recently in the past, maybe century or even less. Whilst before, people used to live actually in multi-families or in places where there were more family living together or more people living together. So I think in a sort of way, we will see this shifting back into it in a very, much more innovative way, with a lot of technology, a lot of Internet of Things, beautiful design, more conscious about anything else. But this is where I see that we are going. And actually, there will be more digital nomads as we move forward.
From globalization to localization in the most positive way. How do you take away,
Correct.
how do you reflect on this, Kelsey?
Well, I think, I agree very much with both Kate and Matt. Especially what resonated with me, Kate, is the idea that it's only been a very small amount of time that we're living in such small apartments individually. And I think this really reflects what's happening in co-living on a whole. And the idea that, in fact, over the last century, most of our purpose-built residential and our cities and our newly built environments are built for what we might call a traditional family or a nuclear family, which is two parents with like 2.5 kids. But the reality is that this subset was actually, kind of a blip on the radar in human history of a lifestyle of the way that we live together. It's a bit controversial to say, but I mean, the numbers are what speak. In cities like Munich, for example, this type of household makes up less than 14% of all households. And in fact, single people alone represent 28% of all households. Yet today, when we think about newly built residential, we're still building for families, which I think is what makes co-living so interesting, is it's actually purpose-built residential for new ways of living, to reflect ways that we're actually living today, which perhaps are with older family members or with grandparents or with children of our previous marriage, with children of a new marriage. It's much more of a puzzle, I think. And I think that's what's really interesting about co-living. And then I think moving more towards the question of digital nomads, we're just witnessing a complete transformation of work today that, of course, COVID accelerated. Everyone was looking towards remote work and trends that it was happening slowly. Well, overnight, pretty much, the entire world spent 3 months experiencing remote work as much as possible. So it really opened people, opened companies, opened a cultural norm of working from home. And even this week, I was speaking with a co-living developer out of the UK, and he was explaining to me that they really want to increase the room size of their co-living units to accommodate for remote work, assuming that most people will be home working 2 or 3 days per week. And that the new norm might become going to the office 1 day per week, going to the office 2 days per week, and not only having co-working space, very close in the co-living building or social space that can accommodate remote work, but allowing the room itself to be transformed for remote work, which I think is it's a big insight into how fast the trend of work from home is going to affect our residential.
It's actually insane to think about how co-living has been reflecting reality that we were unaware of for a long period of time, and then now COVID has sort of just put that into perspective. And with, I think it's beautiful to understand that these new trends are sort of mapping out a path that for a lot of us and people who are in co-living has already been there. We are just, maybe now we have to understand that from a community aspect of things, we might have to take a role of a leader for certain things and help other people who are completely new and within the spectrum are actually users of what any one of us is offering, to understand that we might also have to be a guiding hand for a lot of these people thinking outside of the regular box of people who are into co-living and co-working. So I think that to take away from what Alex has been talking about, sort of have a bird's eye view of things, and then to allow all the other people who are getting into the community to be a part of it. I know that, Kelsey, you have another Zoom meeting in probably 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mm-hmm. So we have you for another 5 minutes, and then let's try to wrap this up in the next 5. I would love to ask each and every one of you to give us maybe sort of like one insight and maybe one trend that you're seeing in the future. And we're not going to let Kate talk first because she probably has the queen view of things. So we're just all going to agree. So Kelsey, why don't you start with sort of what you take away as the future and the trend that you're seeing, or maybe going back to something that we're already a part of, as we said, that you see happening in the future more and more.
Right on the spot, huh? I think what I would like to say about that is maybe a reflection of probably what Antonin was speaking about during the last panel. I think what we see is a real need and desire to incorporate nature and incorporate outside space in our interior living space. And before it kind of felt like a luxury, like let's have a lot of plants, let's have a balcony. And now it's, with the current context, it feels more essential. I think we're remembering that as humans, we can manipulate the environment as much as we want, but at the end of the day, we tend to be happier, more healthy, and more fulfilled when we do have contact with nature. So I think that the future of interior design and an architecture is going to have a big job to do of how we reintegrate ourselves with the planet, how we become more sensitive to our environment, and stop taking an external perspective of what is our natural environment and continuing to try to manipulate it constantly. I think that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Kate?
I personally think that we will see more niche co-living, if that makes sense. Well, so people will feel even stronger the need of not just being in a nice place, in a great environment, etc., but having the right people around them, if that makes sense. So someone really aligns with their values or with their achievements or the goals that they want to pursue. And especially with in mind, maybe if something like COVID and the lockdown and being together with a certain amount of people for a certain amount of time will happen. But I also see that we will see a massive increase in the use of technology and internet in every single thing that the community will do and the residents will do. That's one thing. And I also think that we will see a very, very big developing in older generation co-living, which is something I'm very passionate about. I think there's many people of a certain age, I want to say 55, 60 plus, who are still very active, super healthy, very, very, social, And that maybe because they were economically very stable, had their own property on their own, living on their own, and found themselves extremely lonely and isolated during this time. And the way they think and see things has really changed. And this is, I think, one of the biggest things we will see.
Matt.
all of the above, essentially. For me, the future of co-living and the future of shared living and housing in general is housing that really fosters connection to self, to others, and to nature, and bringing in a lot of these elements that Kate and Kelsey were talking about already. So like, what does that mean in practice? It means designing spaces that enhance resident well-being and social interaction. It means embedding environmental sustainability into the way that we build our spaces as well, and also measuring our impact, measuring our social, environmental, and economic impact as co-living developers and operators, really integrating that into our KPIs in our business metrics. And it just means creating the kind of spaces that foster this authentic connection. So really putting a focus and an investment into building community and into community teams and into training community facilitators to create thriving co-living spaces or thriving homes. And a lot of what that would look like is what Kate and Kelsey already mentioned, like these intergenerational types of spaces, maybe some mixed income spaces, bring in elements of affordability as well, and really creating spaces that are open and inclusive to all, and not just within the building, but also without, to the external community as well. So creating neighborhood hub spaces is what I like to say. Really creating these spaces that are flourishing and providing different types of capital, natural, human, social, community capitals, let's call them, to their residents and to the external communities. So that's kind of my vision for co-living.
Thank you so much. Let's all observe the changing and flourishing ecosystem of co-living in the future. Thank you so much for your feedback. I will allow the session to end just because I know Kelsey has to go. Thank you so much, everyone. That's part of being a member of the community. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll end the session now. Have a few last points alone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Super appreciate it.
Thank you, Rose.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being part of this last session and obviously the entire day. I was very happy to be in a position where I could have talked to so many inspiring people today and share some of the messages that I think are shaping up the future in a brighter way than where we kicked off or where we hoped we were this morning. There is a beauty of being able to summarize everything that has been said. I don't think I have the adequate capacity to do it, but I will do my best to sort of map out everything that we have talked about today and to give you guys maybe even an incentive to watch back the content that we have produced today. And when I say content, I really think about it in that way. We have created a conference that was an event, and we have shared a lot of emotional things, and we have shared a lot of really important business insight, community building tips, the way to look at things and problems from a different perspective, and how the COVID lens has been accelerating and changing the way we work, the way we interact, and the way we build and communicate within our communities and within the new communities that we want to create. But all of that is part of a larger ecosystem that I'm hoping we can, reflecting on nature and reflecting on everything that we talked about today, can take all of these experiences and singular, let's say, exercises, take all of this insight, and then for 2021, all of us give a beauty of giving back to the community and helping others achieve their full potential by giving back, sharing, taking a step back and trying to be leaders in our own communities while understanding that things are inevitably changing for better or for worse in the future. I'm also hoping that next year we can do a co-working and co-living conference Southeast Europe with more people attending in real life, but that we will understand that the digital format, and I'm looking at Misha right now, that the digital format has its advantages, and it's something that we might want to integrate into the future going into 2021. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I know that we have at one point reached over 330 or 350 people tuning in. 370 people. Thank you to all 370 of you who joined us today. That in and of itself is an achievement that I know each and every one person in this room is very proud of. But again, thanks to everyone for joining in. I don't see what that says, but of course. Before we finish, a huge thanks to the entire team here, to Lazar and his technical crew who have guided us through this very successfully, to Misha, who has been the driving force without having the driver's license, to all the guests who have joined us here, Tamara, Željko, Pedro, who has been the beautiful host with Symphony, the entire Symphony team, and who has hosted us here. Thank you for providing this beautiful communal space where we felt right at home, and where hopefully for everyone watching CCCSEE felt like joining us here on the Symphony couch, because for everyone here, community is really the centerfold of everything. Thank you so much. Give all your comments, questions and answers. Keep the chat live. YouTube is there. Send us your emails, write us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. It's at CCC_SEE, and keep in touch with us. We have ideas for next year, but we still have no plans. We are waiting to see how things develop. But even with that, I know that even next year we'll be touching base probably sometime in October. If there are any questions after all of this, feel free to write. We'll try to answer everyone and keep you guys all in tune. For the rest of the EF week and co-working assembly people who have been supporting us, thank you so much for everything. There will be a lineup of different events. Keep track of the EF week hashtag. You will learn of many new things to come. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Uroš from the CCCSEE team, and I hope to see you all next year.